Okie dokie. So today I think I want to talk with you guys some more on I'm trying to get through a lot of Dr. K stuff. So Mr. Girl specifically wanted to talk with me about the Reckful Dr. K relationship. So there's a lot of videos on that. There's a lot of hours on that exchange. So I've done the first two. Looks like I haven't watched this one, but I was watching it on a different account. I've basically finished this one. Um, and then I believe we have one more. Yeah, I think this is the last one. And then we'll be done. In preparation for it, I've just been taking notes. I'm doing my best to basically steelman Dr. K, try to understand his position the most first before I try to like dismantle it, see if I have differing views. And I've taken like 2 pages of notes. So, um, yeah, I've gotten 2 pages of notes from the first two, just like little thoughts, little things that I want to kind of remember. So yeah, let's kind of, I think that's where we'll start first. Um, hello. Hello, everyone who's joining us right now. Yeah, Byron. It's really sad. And that brings up a good point of like while we're doing this whole thing, um, and I'm analyzing this stuff, and even when I'm talking to Mr. Girl, I'm trying to kind of make sure that we're keeping this space of like the tragic reality of like where Reckful's life and how Reckful's life ended. Um, yeah. So this isn't to just like tear down Dr. K at all. I yeah, I would hope you guys would assume that I have probably a complex position on his work. Um, I overall don't have a very negative view of Dr. K at all. But I definitely think that there are concerns of ethics that Dr. K is entirely aware of as well with his work. And I'm trying to kind of understand particularly Dr. K's position because it's not like he's dumb, right? He knows of the like ethical risks that he takes with this work. And so I'm really trying to understand from Dr. K's perspective like why essentially he's taking this like major risk. Did I see Mr. Girl's tweet 37 minutes ago straight for the board? I did not. Should we have you lined up a convo with Dr. Kate? No, not yet. I mean, from my understanding, it's kind of difficult to get in contact with Dr. K. Right? He's just got like probably thousands of people trying to talk to him. But I'll definitely reach out. Hello to everyone joining us. Tails though, should we check out the tweet first? Sure. Sure. Let me pull it up on a separate web page just in case my login info comes up. Um. Okay, great. All right. Oh, it's a big one. And I literally follow 2 people, so his is the only thing that came up. Okay. I don't know who this is. So there's this one 22 minutes ago. I'm guessing you're meaning this one first. Okay. The future of Dr. K's ability to practice medicine is now in the hands of the Massachusetts Board of Registration in Medicine. Oh, wow. Dr. K conducted his second YouTube video. These interviews launched Dr. K's online career due to Reckful's existing fame and his extreme emotionality and praise for Dr. K during the interviews. It is also worth noting that Dr. K received hundreds of dollars in donations from fans during each interview. That is true. The second interview involved asking Byron to discuss childhood trauma. Byron was extremely distraught over the course of the conversation at 1 hour and 16. Dr. K asked if he has a therapist. He said, I've never seen one as useful enough to keep going. And then he said, this time, well, this is not therapy, making air quotes. Dr. K laughed and says, if you really want to get into this, yes, I remember seeing that. That's actually something I wrote down myself. This exchange established a blurry line between those two, but then I think we have to do it consistently, probably for like 48 weeks. Yep, I wrote that down in my own notes. This exchange blurry relationship between the two over the next few months. Byron met with Dr. K 4 more times online and an unknown number of times offline. At some point offline, Dr. K apparently diagnosed Byron with BPD. Oh, interesting. As far as I or anyone else knows, no formal agreement was ever made to enter into a doctor-patient relationship. Interesting. It is admitting that they think he screwed up. The same with the net good argument. If Dr. K champions can't come up with anything better than begging people to ignore his unethical and damaging behavior and pay attention to his good behavior instead, he's in trouble. Dr. K should want his behavior to be audited by the governing body of his state, even if there's even a sliver of question about him blurring the lines he shouldn't blur. He should welcome it. Oh, sorry guys. Why is everyone acting like this is stitching? It feels like admitting guilt. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Mr. Girl did not cite the diagnosing part of the complaint. So when they list BPD, that should be a diagnosis. Usually BPD is meant as borderline personality. Usually when you're diagnosing with bipolar, you would do BP1. I don't know the source of this complaint. So that would be my immediate question is like what it says. He's saying it's from the Massachusetts board. We can check if we want. Doctor, how do you spell his last name? Canoisias. This is his physician profile. No record of malpractice. So this is just a complaint. Let's see. I wonder where he got this from. Like, are complaints publicly available usually? I mean, I don't know the American ethics system for psychiatrists specifically, so I have no idea. That's Mr. Complaints for sure. Oh, interesting. Hello, I just got recommended your channel. Welcome, Esoteric Faye. Esoteric is a great name. That's a dope name. He wrote it. Oh, so this is his own complaint. Interesting. No. I just want to see what people are saying about it. Don't get mad. Don't maybe start when it takes to establish a doctor, blah, blah, blah. State medical boards are as sleazy as the state bars for lawyers when it comes to these issues. They protect them regardless of merits. Does Dr. K even have a legit practice? Oh shit, we've got Rampage on our hand. You're gonna love this. That escalated quickly. Oh no. Interesting. What do you guys think about this? I still can't fully decide. Not just about this situation. I think anyone who tries to make the claim that like he contributed to the eventual suicide, that's a really big jump. And I think it's really dangerous to be holding any practitioner accountable for like clients' decisions. Yeah, I think it's really important that we distill those two, which I wonder if Mr. Girl is connecting those two. His own complaint, he said it in his interview with Dr. K's therapist helpers, he sent in a complaint into the Mass Ethical Board. It probably won't do anything. I feel like Mr. Girl wants Dr. K viewership. It says direct competition. Mr. Girl is trying to be a life coach, but Dr. K is the better version. Maybe, but I mean, I feel like the viewers who are going to be drawn to Dr. K's stuff is probably not going to be interested in Mr. Girl because they have very, very different delivery styles and approaches to things. I think he just genuinely really, really hates Dr. K. He said in his interview, Dr. K's therapist, for helpers, he sent a complaint into the Masses Ethical Board. Someone before going to the board. I'm not sure the board will do anything unless a complaint is written. I don't think one should be critiquing the other. I like Dr. K personally, but I feel like he does blur the lines. He absolutely does. It's the question of he's definitely like towing ethical lines, but ethical and insurance liability isn't the same thing as morality. And I haven't decided for myself, at least yet, if I think that he's crossed morality lines, because I think his argument from basically like a position of, I know that this is high risk for myself, but I think I can basically like AOE help people more and like offer like really solid advice, is definitely something that I kind of respect. And more than that, he's not stupid, so he knows the risk he's taking. So whether or not I agree or disagree with like kind of his position on everything, I still think what he's doing is actually decently brave. Now, just because I think something's brave doesn't think I don't think it's moral. I really do my best to not like moralize things unless I'm actually moralizing them. Yeah, I'm glad he's doing what he's doing if everyone is so scared of the pushback and there's a big problem. Yeah, that's the issue, right? Is like, even as somebody in my field, before I was trained and licensed, say I wanted to volunteer with like peer support, and I knew that I was probably going to be maybe better at it than somebody else because I've got like a fair bit of education. Because you can be educated and then not licensed, right? You can go all the way through and get fully educated, do all your practicums that it requires to be a psychologist, and just not go on to the next step of licensing yourself, right? And then you have no ethical obligations anywhere. That doesn't mean necessary behavior is unethical, but it's at least not legally unethical. I had an easier time volunteering and supporting people in that role before I was licensed, whereas now, even when I have people being like, could you run just like a volunteer group where people could just talk about things, my basic answer usually has to be no. Just because of this like blurry line with ethics, which is like kind of this like, what is therapy? Are we preventing therapists from doing like therapeutic actions that could actually benefit way more people purely because of insurance? So, yeah. Actually may improve my impression of therapy in general. That's really important, that he's improving your impression of therapy in general. The one thing I worry about is I would agree that Dr. K is an excellent psychotherapist. The problem is, does he set the bar too high as well? Because I've certainly had psychotherapists similarly as good as him. It took me a long time to find them. Have a thin blue line equivalent. Do professional self-police your fellows. Yeah. So as soon as you're registered to a college, you're now basically being self-policed by your own registered body. So you can lose your license and stuff like that. And we're really, really stringent about it because of like abuses in this field, because it's working with vulnerable people. We want to be like extra careful that abuses aren't happening. And there was like part of the like registry for psychologists like was a bit reactionary, not fully, but in part because there was like a whole bunch of like abuse scandals that came out around like psychologists grooming children and stuff like that. So psychologists are really intense about like their ethics board. Why is providing therapy online such a big deal? How is that different than group therapy? This is the whole question, is now that we've moved to online therapy, the question is, what is therapy? If I talk with my friend, I have a whole bunch of skills. I actually do therapy very similar to Dr. K, but I would not say our styles are the most common style. When I watch his stuff, it's very weird watching his stuff and being like, that's actually very similar to how I often work with clients. I'm a little bit less directive than him. I really try to push the client to have these realizations more than he will often give them these realizations. Not that I necessarily think that's better or worse. Like, I'm not comparing myself and being like, I'm the same and I'm just as good. That's not what I'm saying. But the question of like, what is therapy is unclear. Even when I've tried to Google it, I've tried to like look up like research articles or like what like kind of psychologists say what therapy is. It's not super clear. If I'm talking with my friend and I have like a deep self-explorative conversation with them about themselves that they find really helpful, is that therapy? What if I bring in therapeutic skills and psychoeducation to help them? Is that therapy? Is it therapy only when they're paying me in money? Because in this case, Dr. K wasn't getting paid by Reckful. If anything, he was getting like paid by the viewership that it offered him, right? And the donations that it opened him access to. But he was already a medically trained doctor, so he didn't really need the money or anything like that. Did you watch the talks with Reckful? I am most of the way through them, yeah. Think there's any problem with him profiting off of it? I assume he's made millions. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. It just depends on whether or not, basically, I think he's actually doing therapy, which I think he is, unless we're saying therapy is when you like enter like into that formal arrangement where they're paying you. Then he's not doing therapy. He's doing psychoeducation and live demos with consenting participants. Some people have been like, wouldn't it be better if you used actors? Maybe, but part of probably what is so powerful people is hearing people give like authentic views and experiences, and people like hearing the emotion in their voice and like really resonating. And I think that's something you have to get a really, really high quality actor to like just fake that. Have you watched the interview Mr. Girl did with the Healthy Gamer coach? I watched a little bit of it. I watched a little bit. I need to watch more. Why does it matter what therapy is, LOL? Isn't the liability to the relationship between the client and the therapist not the therapy itself? Like, someone can just offer someone else therapeutic support, like you're saying, and it shouldn't be a matter if their background is clinical or not. I agree. And it's like, it's the issue is that it's become this whole muddy water where, like, even myself, I'm like, hey, this group at, say there's like a local church that wants to just host some free addiction services. They're not even claiming it's professional, and they just ask if I can come in and volunteer. But I'm a licensed addiction counselor. Can I volunteer or can I not? Because if I'm a professional, are those individuals coming going to see it as therapy? And what does that mean? And is that bad, right? It's this like huge confusing thing that just like we don't have an answer to. How does liability factor into what is therapy? Because you are liably accountable for what is therapy. You are, as a professional, if you are offering the service of therapy, what is considered therapy is what you're legally liable for. That's why what is therapy is connected to liability, if that makes sense. Shadow banned on YouTube removes some incentive to engage with it. I don't think I'm shadow banned. I literally like just started on YouTube, so boosting viewer count per Discord message. Let's freaking go. Nice. Thanks for coming in. Sounds like the board needs to sharpen up the lines between what you can and can't do. Until then, I don't see why this would be a legal issue. Yeah, and that's why like the whole thing with Dr. K is super gray. And it's why I'm not willing to put like moral claims on it. I definitely do not obviously blame him at all for anything that happened with Reckful. There's certain like questions in his like therapeutic approach that I might have, but they're not even critiques. They're just like genuinely questions I would have for Dr. K to like see what he was thinking about it. There's some concern about like you're making people's like emotional vulnerability entertainment, and is that bad? And you could be like, well, it might not be good or bad. It basically is like, do you think Dr. Phil is bad for what he does? And if you're like, yes, then I guess probably what Dr. K does is bad, but he does more psychoeducation than Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil does a lot more like, he's really trying to get like, if it bleeds, it leads. Whereas Dr. K seems to offer a lot more advice, practical advice, empirical advice, and psychoeducation that's really solid based on what I've seen in his live streams. It's just the therapy that Dr. Phil does, you could argue, is entertainment therapy. So is that unethical? And broadly, it seems like society's decided no, because Dr. Phil's been going live and strong. And I mean, we could all argue about the quality of Dr. Phil's therapy. That's a fair conversation to have because it's very sensationalized. But yeah, he's definitely pop therapy. Yeah, which is why I'm saying like we can definitely have conversations about the quality of therapy that he offers. I feel like a casual conversation with a friend that ends up being therapeutic isn't necessarily therapy. I totally agree. I think it's about the intent of the client going into the conversation. The lines get blurred from you when somebody knows that you've experienced being a therapist and they enter the conversation with you in the intent of fixing the problems, which as somebody who's in the mental health field, lots of people do. Or they'll just enter into a relationship with you in a friendship way, but then something comes up and you're obviously the first person that they think of to talk to because they know you'll get it and you'll give good advice. And that's where things get dicey. And as a good human human being who's friends with that person, to be honest, I almost never hesitate to talk to them because I got into this field because I care about people. It's just usually I don't book follow-up sessions. Like that to me is where the therapeutic line for me feels the most comfortable to draw, is like anytime they approach me and want to talk, I'm usually willing to give it as long as I like am having my own like healthy boundaries of like emotional space for myself. But usually if like friends want to talk about stuff, I'm always willing to hear it. It's just like I'm not going to book like, hey, we should probably book sessions for you and I to talk for the next 4 to 6 weeks, which is something Dr. K did with Reckville, which is why there's that blurry line again of being like, okay, well, like, to what extent is this a client-therapist relationship? To what extent is consent being given? Is there confidentiality breaches if the client is consenting to the confidentiality breach? Like, it's this huge thing that, to be honest, like, psychologist associations haven't dealt with because we're not prepared for, like, Twitch. Because, to be honest, most psychologists who are deciding ethics boards are, like, very old. And not that being old is necessarily bad, but they're very out of touch with technology. So probably most of them making these ethics decisions don't even know that Twitch exists. I mean, it's like Dr. Oz as well. He says some wacko shit, but it's just largely accepted. Yeah, and he doesn't lose his license. Maybe the question is how we feel about streaming therapy, because if it only matters about consent, then the participant, they sign the consent. And my understanding is that Dr. K actually gets them to sign a certain level of consent form and like release form. So even the consent piece, he's kind of covered, if that, what I've heard is correct. Because it only matters about consent, then get the participant to sign their consent and are they aware of entering it? If so, is there anything wrong? Probably not, but I bet you, from what I can see, when I've like looked on different like Reddit chains that don't like Dr. K, people who at least claim to be psychotherapists and they at least like know the jargon well enough that I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. They basically claim like questions of like, is it fully informed, freely given consent, especially for like participants that he's interviewed that are not famous streamers or more small time, I know Redditors, who are more small time, where they might be consenting to more than they're actually willing to do because they want to get that viewership. Again, in my view, if they're two adults, barring very rare circumstances, I try to assume that they're giving fully informed consent. But it's a question we deal with in addictions all the time, is can you claim that somebody is giving full informed consent if they're detoxing, right? Because in that situation, sometimes they'll say anything just to like get a place to detox and be safe. And in other ways, when they're detoxing, their minds are like actually affected by drugs to the point of saying like, is this ethical? Like, are they actually consenting? Can they even understand what they say they understand because they're detoxing? So they're like feeling really sickly. Sometimes it really affects their cognitive processing. So consent and stuff like that is actually a really, really muddy area in at least psychology all the time, because of like power relationships and all sorts of things that we think could like influence the level of consent somebody can give. Pretty sure Dr. Gay has had some guests that said they were good at opening up on a stream, which is pretty shitty. That is really sad. Especially if like as a result of somebody opening up on his stream, it causes like really negative like reactions back. Like people like harassing them or bullying them or making fun of them. I think also one thing I noticed when I was listening to the Reckville thing is that Reckville gets really embarrassed by what chat says a couple of times. Like when he's talking about his psilocybin use, they keep kind of implying he's a drug addict. I don't know how many. The chat isn't up on the video that I'm watching. But like that's an issue around like therapy that's like, is that okay? Like Dr. K managed it decently well by just being like, just ignore it, don't worry about it. But like Reckville goes back to chat a couple of times, like being kind of uncomfortable with what chat was claiming about him. His chat was already aware of his excessive mushroom use. Yeah. But he was really embarrassed that they were calling him a drug addict and like really tries to push Dr. K into saying whether or not Dr. K thinks that Reckville is a drug addict. Like it was really important to him. Which again, I'm not even saying that that's bad or good. I'm just saying like they bring up these concerns of like, is this an issue of confidentiality because it's public? Now he has other people giving their opinions. Could it expose not just Reckville, but like other future streamers to like forms of bullying because they hear these vulnerabilities? Like, it's just like, it's just messy. It's gray. Excessive? Oh, I don't know. He was saying he was doing like 1 gram of psilocybin a day, but then it also sounds like, based on what I've read from like other things, that he was taking a lot more than that, at least towards like the end of his life. So like, I don't know. I'm not really here to comment on reckless psilocybin use at all. In large part because like at this point, like he's not here to defend himself, and the reality is like the whole situation is tragic, that I'm not going to focus on like his psilocybin use. It feels like it reduces the like tragedy and the enormity of the situation to like trying to decide if he's a overusing, and I'm like, that's not really the point here. Like it might be a factor to look at, but I don't want to like reduce the conversation, you know. I'm saying in general, if you watch his chat is horrible. Howlith, are you saying that Dr. K's chat is horrible or Reckful's chat was horrible? Just to make sure I'm understanding you. Not a login name. Okay, Reckful just picked out the wrong comments every time. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with him. Okay. I wasn't familiar with Reckful. Dr. K in generals is too. Yeah, that's fair. I think as soon as you start getting large too, it's pretty difficult to not get a somewhat like cringy chat, but yeah. I wonder what the average age of Dr. K chat is. That's a really good question. My understanding is he's trying to do some research on his work right now, so we might actually have stats and data coming out at some point. You need to have some strong evidence to substantiate that. I don't think Dr. K aims at making people cry. Oh, with foot job. Okay. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the stream. I would argue that Dr. K wants them to open up and cry because that's what gets views and he knows how to get them to. I wouldn't argue that's the case. I would argue he's doing very much like he's blending a couple of major forms of therapy, but he's blending basically kind of a psychodynamic approach with the certain memories and grief getting locked in at certain ages, and a form of like emotional awareness therapy. I'm not sure precisely which one he'd be using. There's a lot of them. They're very similar. And so when they're crying, a large goal of getting clients, particularly North American clients who tend to like, if you're a very stereotypical North American that's kind of caught up in like the more classic Protestant work ethic worldview that most people in North America are, we tend to really, really dismiss and not fully feel our emotions. So somebody who's doing like emotional awareness therapy, where they're trying to build regulation, part of why they're leading their client to allow them to cry is to get them to basically like the goal. How I had a prof explain it to me is you kind of want to guide the client into going down into these deep, really core emotions and this core area of grief, and then smoothly bring them up so that their system starts to learn, I can go down and come back up and still be safe. Because a lot of times for people, they come down and they maybe get yelled at, or they get told by their parents to go to their room, or they get made fun of for how they cry, or they get embarrassed because of just how people react around them, or the way like culture sometimes views crying. And so they learn, I can go down and it's dangerous, it's bad. So they try to avoid it. So you could argue that part of why he's trying to make them cry is to help them actually like get connected into their emotions and then bring them back up safely. Now, I think a legitimate argument that we might have for Dr. K is he's bringing them down because that's a skill of like mirroring and chaining that you can learn in like pretty basic CBT and stuff like that. Is he actually able to effectively bring them back up safely in a public setting? That's like the question that basically I'd have. With Reckful reports that he brings him back up safely. He feels better at the end, right? The fact that he says, yeah, I feel better, right? Okay, that means that's usually a good indicator that I successfully brought the client back up and they still feel safe in the relationship, which is good. That's what you want. Right, so we at this point, we just have to choose whether or not we believe Reckful at his words. That doesn't mean, though, that that's going to be the case for every one of the people who come on Dr. K's show. Kind of unrelated, but what are your thoughts on Dr. K introducing his Eastern philosophy of the mind to not only his content, but from it sounds like his professional practice as well? The way he caveats it, I appreciate, which is basically being like, just so you know, this isn't science, this is Eastern philosophy, and at least, in fairness, I've only seen his stuff with Reckful so far. I'm really just starting my like my like study and like understanding of Dr. K. I haven't really spent time in his content before. The way he at least prefaces it with Reckful, he does a good job of saying, this is my stuff, my opinion, my Eastern philosophy. It's not science. I don't have a problem with it. He's very prescriptive with his meditation techniques. And so you could definitely argue like perhaps he should get like more consent from his client, but it's hard to say that he doesn't, right? Because if they say like, I'm not really interested in that, you know, then he might, I don't know. If they say, I'm not really interested, would he still tell them to do it? I have no idea. Because usually people are pretty willing to try anything a professional recommends, even if it's like weird breathing techniques and stuff like that. Yeah. Have you talked about his coaching? Like that's another ethics issue where he's creating unlicensed therapists. The peer counseling. So the issue with the peer counseling is it's a pretty standard model. A lot of like universities implement it. The only ethical questions I've had, and I haven't done any research, so I have no level of the background safety checks that they're doing internally. No idea, right? So most universities that I've attended at least have some sort of similar peer support. They offer a pretty decent training, but there's not actually a lot of like quality control that's being done beyond just like they have to submit reports overall. So the ethics of that program would be in large part how are they selling it. So it's probably something I should look into. I'm going to grab my agenda. Is it called the Healthy Gamer Coaches? Was a Mr. Girlfriend and did the worst possible job of explaining anything. Yeah. When I was listening to him, it felt like he was kind of limp-wristed, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing. I just like when I was listening to it, I really didn't feel like I got a good understanding of what the program itself is. Oh, thanks, Esoteric Faye. Well, I'm glad somebody recommended it to you. I have no idea who recommended it, but make sure you tell them that I said thank you and that we're glad to have you. And Esoteric Faye is actually a really badass name, so just saying. Have you talked about his coaching? Oh, yeah. I'm going to look into the gamer coaching because the ethics is unclear. Because this is the problem with mental health is we're unclear about so many ethics because we have peer counseling. And part of why we kind of are like all over the place with ethics is there's this massive need. And we have licensure and insurance companies that really try to limit psychotherapy availability. We have psychotherapists who charge like $220 an hour, which is crazy amount of money, so nobody can afford it, and this massive need for mental health. So we're trying to brainstorm other ways to provide resources and support. And so as a result of kind of the en masse movement at a business level to meet the need, there's lots of ethical questions that are being brought up that, like, to be honest, the APA is only ethically and legally accountable for registered psychologists in America, or in Canada, that would be the CPA, or in Alberta, that would be the APA. Again, the Alberta Psychology Association is the APA, but it's not the American APA. That's the bigger APA because Alberta likes our acronyms too, I guess. So technically, basically, if the peer reviewers were overseen fundamentally by a couple of psychologists who checked over their notes and then checked in with their coaches regularly enough, technically that would be ethical. What are your thoughts on Mr. Girl doing regarding Dr. K? It seems a bit public, like a public lynching. Do you think it's warranted? I'm going to talk to him. Basically, if you have a concern about somebody and you want to submit a ethics report, I don't have a problem with that. Like, you should, basically. Am I from Alberta? I am from Alberta, yeah. If that makes all of you watch my views immediately half as you find out I'm from Alberta. Just kidding. If you want to make like an ethics report to a board, that's totally within your peer review to do. I don't know if they're going to do anything with it because he wasn't the client, he wasn't related to the client, and it's been like 2 years, which means probably somebody's already submitted this report already privately. The fact that he's going on like a public crusade, doxed. The fact that he's going on a public crusade, like, I don't know. Do I think it's wrong? No, but I also don't know if I agree with it. Like, I don't think I would join the public crusade. Yeah. Because he's a public figure. And so, like, Mr. Girl is making the complaints and the accusations in the same sphere that Dr. K is working in. Which is one thing I get a really big issue with, is when people like say somebody's got an issue with somebody privately and then they make it really public. I have an issue with that because they're taking the issue from one plane and they're bringing it to another plane where it might not be warranted because the dynamics are totally different. But he's making the accusations on public things, on public records, on things that are on Healthy Gaming YouTube. So I don't know. And like fundamentally, I wouldn't infringe on anyone's right to make a report. And yeah, as 30-1 said, like, it's also gray. You know, if the board decides to side with Mr. Girl, I mean, he's going to feel really vindicated. But I'm still waiting to see, like, the data that Dr. K says he's working on to show whether or not his work has been positive and good, has been a net good, right? And you can't just use self-reports because then you're going to get a very biased sample where your viewers are going to be the most likely to fill out this self-report of like, yes, this was great because they love you, right? So I'd be curious to see like the methodology he's going about to see if this is effective. I think my understanding is he's doing more research on his peer coaching, not his actual video channel. It would be pretty hard to do a good study on his video channel because again, you're going to get a really really biased sample selection. So I don't know. It's tricky. Also that he's grasping at straws. He was saying shit like he's trying to steal Destiny's girlfriend unironically, then was saying he's doing it for profit. Now he's really focused on the Reckville situation publicly. Yeah, but he's always been kind of a like provocateur, it seems, his whole life. It's just like after he met with Destiny, his provocativeness blew up because a bunch of people saw it, right? And it got a lot of traction. But when you like look at stuff like from like even 2020 of Mr. Girl, like he's always been kind of provocative in the way he talks and the like kind of content that he puts out. So I mean, like he's one of the only like Twitch streamers I know of that's like got videos on like Pornhub of him like masturbating and stuff. So like he's always been kind of like pushing. He's very avant-garde in that way. So yeah. I really like to chat with Steve a couple of days back. A couple good stuff. Thanks. If you have any recommendations about how to talk about statistics better, I was not super impressed with my own showing with Steven. So if anyone has any recommendations for how to talk about IQ and statistics better, I think my rhetoric game needs to get improved. It was way too esoteric. Esoteric Faye would like that. It was way too esoteric and like very, very technical, and I didn't explain it very well. And I don't think, like, say Mr. Girl does want clicks, he might want clicks, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily illegitimate, right? It makes it like, oh, maybe it questionable, but like almost everyone who's streaming wants clicks. Like that's why they're here for a large part, right? I mean, a lot of them have other purposes behind it, and the part of the reasons why they want clicks differs and varies, right? Like some people are really big advocates, so they want clicks in part because, yeah, they get money and views and they make they're living from this, but also, you know, they care about their ideas getting out there. So I don't want to just like shit on somebody just because they want clicks. Like they're in the streaming sphere, of course they do. Yeah, I have no issues with public criticism, Dr. K, and I think like anyone who's going to be in a public space just has to like accept that there will be public criticisms. There's going to be public criticisms of me, assuming I ever like like assuming I stay in this space for long enough and like get like notable enough, basically. Like there's, even if I don't, there's a good chance there'll be something like that comes up about me, about everyone. So I have no issue with like publicly challenging him. I don't know how I feel about him like releasing his complaint, but I don't know. I'm curious to see if anything happens as a result of the board. Like I'm curious to see if anything happens. And I know part of what I wonder is Dr. K is notorious for being a non-drama. He doesn't confront anyone. He doesn't engage with this stuff. Part of me wonders if Mr. Girl is like just trying to like poke him enough to like get him to engage. I'd be curious. Because if he does respond, that would be very counter. I'll definitely be watching vids as soon as release, along with some popcorn. Yes. I mean, me and Mr. Girl are talking on the 3rd. I'm actually really excited. I feel like even though like I think we're gonna disagree on a lot of stuff, I tend to get along really well with like very strange characters. Because even though I haven't like fully let myself out because I'm still a little like socially insecure and nervous on Twitch, I'm a pretty strange character. So I feel like Mr. Girl and I might actually get along pretty well, which will be interesting because I think we'll disagree on a lot of psychology. Is making a lot of money though. If you really has 60 coaches in there doing 45 an hour, do they charge for the coaches? 30 to 1? Do they charge for the peer coaching? You're already working on my not so erudite criticism video. All right, bring it, baby. No, genuinely, I'm actually pretty open to criticism, except for on like sad days. Sometimes I have sad days, and then I just don't read it because I'm like, hey, my mood's not in a great place. There's probably no point in reading criticisms because I'm just going to be sad. I'd rather read it on the days when I'm like, yeah, I'm just like open to hearing feedback and I want to grow and learn. Burn the Destiny Bridge, be immortalized forever on Reddit. Yeah, or live stream fails, whichever comes first, I guess. Exhibitionism in a sexual arena is sketchy? Question mark. Destiny doesn't need anything if the person can afford. Yeah, I feel like you guys have gone into what I don't really know where this conversation. Okay, maybe let's put on some of this.
Dog shit. You'd say yes.
Tell me if you can't hear it.
Sure, that I'll do.
Okay.
I'll send dog shit.
I think we got to turn it up a little bit. Hold on.
Something people are interested in seeing?
No, yeah. Where do you draw the line? So you won't eat people, I assume.
I won't eat people. That's correct.
Yeah. What would you do that they do?
I mean, I drink alcohol and I eat meat, but I don't do it as part of my sadhana. I just do it because I enjoy it from time to time. So definitely. I'm not interested in doing a Gauri sadhana. That's not my path. I decided I would do a Gauri sadhana if something ever happened to my wife and kids and like all of my material attachments were gone. I'll become a monk again, and a Gauri sadhana may be a part of that. But we'll see. But yeah. Can I do one more question, Reckful? This one's kind of about you.
No, of course. I'm enjoying just listening.
Do you think Reckful is looking for an easy way out of his depression? If so, do you think that his approach to his depression ultimately leading to the root? If so, do you think that is his approach to his depression ultimately leading to the root of his depression? I understand. Okay. So I think the question is, do you think Reckful is looking for an easy way out of his depression? And do you think that looking for an easy way out of your depression is the root of why you're depressed? That's what I think the question is.
I hope it's a no. What do you think?
Do you think you're looking for an easy solution to your depression?
I was looking for any solution, so that part he's right, but it's not the reason I'm depressed. I was depressed to start with.
For the coaching.
Yeah.
They charge $45 an hour for the coaching. Okay. That's something that I don't know how I feel about, because $45 an hour for a non-licensed professional. So most peer counseling at university is free. It's volunteer. It's still sad seeing. I know every time I watch these videos I'm watching Reckful, I get really sad because you like know where this goes, right? Not because of these conversations, but his life, like where it goes. It's really sad. How does actual therapy? So it varies by like state and province, but in Alberta, therapists are allowed to charge up to $220 an hour. So 45 an hour is a lot cheaper. But it's more than I get paid per hour to do like licensed addiction counseling, which like isn't necessarily, they might be doing better counseling than I've done. But they're not licensed professionals. I'd feel better about it if it was free. 45 is for booking 20 sessions. Wait. So if you book 20 sessions each, okay, thanks Artisan. So for 55 sessions, I'm going to actually write this down because this is going to be part of my thoughts on this. He pays his coaches though. Okay. This is still a big maybe if there's lots and lots of like professional clinical oversight of these individuals. There's a maybe. I don't think 45 is a fair price. That feels expensive for a non-registered professional. Okay, so coaches. Or are they licensed professionals? Like, are they always like students, or are they just people who have a screenshot in your Discord if you want? Please do. That would be amazing. Even just post me the link that you're getting this from, and then I'll hack the internet. Just kidding. I'll look it up too. So it's $55 per session for 12. Okay, so they're doing more of, they're trying to incentivize long-term therapy as well. That's good. I definitely more agree with that broadly. But at the rate, let's see, let's do some simple math here. So say I got 55 times 12. So $660 for 2 months of counseling. Is not too bad comparing like if it's $220 per hour. That would be like weekly counseling. But they're not licensed professionals. So what level of like training are they getting offered? Personal coaching. In Alberta, you can get a 1-hour session with a professional for like $20 depending on your situation. Depending on your situation and depending on the counseling therapist. So some counselors or psychologists will go down only 50%. Some of them are subsidized by the government, so they can go down as low as 20, but it really, really depends. Technically, though, the cap that they can charge per hour is $220 in Alberta. Okay, they get trained in a 10-week course, 10 weeks of training. By Dr. K himself. And it says they get supervision. Okay. The big question is, what does that supervision actually translate into? In Mr. Girl's interview with the coach said he hadn't seen Dr. K in like a year. It sounded like there was little oversight. I wonder though, because Dr. K might have other psychologists hired on to be doing some of this oversight now, because he's big enough that he's probably got a bit of an institution forming, so he might have like some middle manager, a psychologist overseeing like a number of them. Coach said he hadn't seen Dr. in a year. That's the problem with any program, is the more you scale it up, the more problems become, because things get so much bigger and so much faster, and there's so much more like chaos and entropy and stuff like that. I'm gonna move my camera over because I keep on just like leaning to try, like trying to be in the frame, and I don't know why I'm not just moving my camera. I put in general chat the links and screenshots. Awesome. Okay, let's pull those bad boys up. let's pull them up. Okay, general chat. Yeah, I do have a Discord if anyone wants. They can find it. Thank you, Artisan. That's great. Are you a psychiatrist in Alberta? No, I am not a psychiatrist, just to be super clear. I never want to like false advertise. I am a registered, I'm a licensed, sorry, I'm getting distracted because I'm also looking for the Healthy Gamer website and trying to bring it up for you guys to see. Let me just do that first because I don't multitask very well. Okay, so you have to sign in with Discord. Interesting. Very interesting website. Okay, sure. Now you guys have all seen my Discord number if you'd like to add me. I don't really care though, you can add me if you want. Sure. Personal coaching is a 50-minute session. Okay, let's select the cheapest one. Okay. Okay. This isn't even my real email. You guys are just seeing all my deets. I'm just going to put in I'm just going to enter something I just want to move on with. I just want to move along in this to see kind of if we get more info. Sure, 2002. Am I old enough? Would that make me 18 if I said 2002? Math! Yes. Sure. Sandra. None of these are my correct addresses, by the way, in case you're getting excited. Okay, this is what I want. To continue the sign-up process, you must verify that you have read and understood the information contained in the following links. Terms of service, privacy, coaching services agreement. This might be interesting. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't say what I was. I'm very sorry, I got distracted. Okay, I am a licensed addictions counselor. I am also a psychometrician, and I am going to school. I'm doing my master's in forensic clinical psychology, specializing in adolescents. I apologize. So yeah, I definitely doxed. Yeah, you guys can go to all of my 5-year-old addresses and find me. You should know that Dr. K, I think Dr. K said he only gets a flat fee from his video revenues, regardless of how they do, and the rest of it goes into healthy gamer mental health causes. Would be nice to have more transparency on that. Yeah, I mean, I don't even have an issue. Like, if he's successful and he's making money, like, it's fine. If he's helping people, like, get your yachts, you know? Dr. K has dismissed a lot of his coaches, he said, because a lot of them had their own problems and weren't fit to be coaches. That's good. The problem is that you probably need to have a better system set up then to prevent people from becoming a coach in the first place, because that means somebody spent money on coaches that you've later potentially dismissed. I am going to be talking to Dr. Girldan on February 3rd. I'm going to make a big schedule on Google and just release it to you guys so you guys can see it. Because I recognize how annoying. It's probably just going to be on my Discord for now, because I'm only really able to commit to Wednesday afternoons as like a regular schedule, and Twitch is just you have to commit to like weekly things, and mine are going to like change week by week because I have another job. Having a friend to be open to and push you is really helpful, but I agree, it's feast and famine depending on which coach you get. Yeah. I'm catching up. Dr. K trains people and then lets them loose in the world after 10 weeks. That's actually more training than a lot of places. A psychometrician is somebody who does like psychological testing, so IQ testing, neurological testing for like brain injuries. So a lot of people think brain injuries and think like brain scans. I don't do brain scans, but we can do different like block tests and certain memory tests to test for different the functioning in different areas of your brain. Okay, one thing one would think that if a person contacted Healthy Game about how money is distributed internally, who gets paid and what percentage, that they should be open and transparent about that. Sort of, but a lot of companies aren't super transparent about their money. So I wish businesses overall would be more transparent, but I think the reality is if they were, we'd have to like we'd see a lot of people just like paying their CEOs and upper management like 90% of the revenue. So, yeah. Did I say Dr. Girl? He's moving up in life, guys. I just promoted him. Are there any online IQ tests that are good? Nope. In my view, if you're going to do an IQ test, you have to have a clinician present. They know how to accurately give IQ tests. They're able to watch for like extra outside the test behavior that might dramatically affect how we interpret it. So definitely no good online IQ tests. They're almost always just abstract puzzle reasoning. Or if you really want to know, you got to get an official one administered to you. Yes, but they're expensive. Sorry. Hey, Erudite, tried to ask you during the Destiny talk. I apologize. I was really struggling with that conversation. I was really, really tired, and I have a brain injury, and so when I get tired, I get dumb. No better way to say it. I just can't keep up with conversations well. Since you work in forensic psych, training in it, are you in Canada? I am in Canada. Are you familiar with Jan Xiao or Leora Dow, two of my favorite props from when I was going? No, I'm not. I don't know where you're from though, Leora. Oh, Dow. Okanagan. Nope. I've never been to that school, so I'm not familiar with them. I wonder if I've read if she does research, I might have read some articles by her. This is how you find researchers, if they're signed up to Google Scholar. She is! No, this is not the right one. That's Elizabeth. But this is how sometimes you can see user profiles for researchers. They'll get connected, and then you can see how often they're cited. And basically, if they're like a successful academic, depending on how old they are, they should have a higher number of citations. So yeah, like 2,000 citations for Elizabeth Dull, if she's decently young, is pretty good. Here's a fun one. What's that guy? Richard Wolff. How do you spell his last name? Is it Richard Wolff? It's with two D's. Yeah. Here's a classic one of basically he failed at academia, so he went into pop. Can't even find him anymore. I found him once. Richard D. Wolff. Maybe he'll come up when I do. Ah! I once found a citation number. Maybe he's taken himself off. He only had like 500, which is bad. Like it basically at his age, it means he's kind of a failed academic. Just to tell you how I feel about Richard Wolff. Okay, where are we? Where's my... Didn't Destiny have a heated combo with him? Yeah, it was so bad too. He just like, if you watch it, it's so frustrating. He just like yells at Destiny for talking too fast all the time. It's so bad. It's so cringy. Oftentimes, academics who fail at being an academic will then become a pop academic. And so, not always, but it's a good way of testing whether or not somebody's actually worth their salt. Like, because you can find a PhD who says anything, it's important to kind of be like, is this PhD actually worth their salt? Unfortunately, it's just like, what's the saying? Consumer beware. I forget what it is in Latin. I should look it up because I always think about it. I spelt consumer very terribly. It's a Latin phrase. Caveat emptor. Yeah, consumer beware. There's a lot of that with information right now, which is very cringe, but there's just a lot of PhDs who will tell you anything that you want to hear, as we can see. Would I say that was same with Jordan Peterson? Let's check Jordan Peterson's citation number. In the Scholar. So these are only scholarly citations. They're not just going to be like his fanboys making citations. Jordan B. Peterson. Yeah, 17,000. That's very good. That's strong. So And you can see he actually did a lot of research. He did a lot of aspects of Big Five. Jordan B. Peterson was actually an excellent psychological researcher. He was a very, very, I mean, the fact that he was a tenured professor at U of T, which has one of the best psychology programs in Canada, should tell you enough about Jordan B. Peterson as an academic. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with all his political takes, because that's obviously outside of his expertise. But as far as psychology, he actually knows what he's talking about. You could argue that like maybe he doesn't always make the best arguments using the data, but he definitely is he's well trained. What source are you searching these people through? I am searching it through Google Scholar usually. That's the first one I check. After that, figuring out their citation number is just a lot more difficult. I wonder if he still comes up. He was my supervisor. I said maybe Jay. I should probably know this, but... See, like I know that he comes up with citation number, but I'm not getting it. So like, why? Maybe if I get rid of the periods, it'll come up. Ah! It just doesn't come up sometimes. But this is my old supervising professor for my undergrad. And so I don't really know. I've definitely seen his citation number before. So I'm not sure if they've changed something. Is there any way to like do an extra fancy study search? Profiles. Yeah, I probably should delete profile if I'm searching profiles. Ah, not him. Hey, but maybe we can find R.D. Wolf. Is this the right? No, this isn't the right one. It's this, right? Now I'm getting confused again. Yeah. Yeah, he's not even coming up. Yeah, I mean, the fact that he hasn't even listed himself to be professionally cited is weird. Although my supervisor isn't coming up, which is very weird. He should come up. Yeah, but he's not anymore, which is weird. Because my supervising professor had about 10,000 citations last time I checked. I don't know. I don't need to worry about this right now. What source? Sorry, searching. Okay, would you say the same? Okay. Caveat enter. Thank you. Jump ahead. Do you think he uses too much conjecture in his psych arguments? I need to know kind of what you mean. Like anytime it comes to like Jordan Peterson, I think he's like really long-winded and uses a lot of like narrative language. So I pretty much always want to analyze his statements fresh after watching his statements because he's pretty easy to misconstrue. This is what I tell everyone I talk to about Peterson as someone with psych degrees. I hate him as a person, but his work in psych is undeniably brilliant. Undeniably brilliant. And to be honest, you can even hate his political takes, but he seems to be overall a pretty nice person. So like, if you hate him as a person, I don't know. I don't really understand that. Like, there's nothing he's done that makes me be like, I hate him, even if I disagree with some of his takes, which I broadly actually like find him. His political takes are dog shit. That clip of him on Rogan actually made no sense. Clip of him on Rogan. We never want to watch clips. Those are always bad. Rogan. Is it this one? Okay, here's one.
The New York Times once described Jordan Peterson as the most influential public intellectual in the Western world. However, since 12 Rules for Life became a bestseller, the controversial philosopher has outed himself as, well, a bit of a fraud. Here he is giving some nuggets of wisdom to Joe Rogan.
Hard to sort.
Wow, way to just completely like poison the well immediately. Like, I feel like I should have just skipped the first 20 seconds so that I'm not immediately being like, oh, like how is he just literally proven himself to be a fake stupid idiot?
Sort out. The climate change one is a weird one. So that
well,
one.
That's because there's no such thing as climate, right? Climate and everything are the same word. And that's what bothers me about the climate change types. It's like, this is something that bothers me about it technically. It's like, well, climate is about everything. So, okay. But your models aren't based on everything.
What does he mean climate is based on everything? What is the definition of climate? Oh, man. The weather conditions prevailing in an area. What does he mean it's about everything? What does he mean by that?
Something that bothers me about it, technically. It's like, well, climate is about everything. So, okay. But your models aren't based on everything. Your models are based on
Warming.
a set number of variables.
Yeah.
So that means you've reduced the variables, which are everything, to that set. Well, how did you decide which set of variables to include?
Okay, so I think he's saying climate is like environment, which is like everything in the entire world is climate. I think is what he's trying to say. So like any factor, which is a weird take for sure.
Including the equation if it's about everything. And that's not just a criticism. That's like, if it's about everything, your models aren't right. Because your models do not and cannot model everything.
Jordan.
No, Michael. I don't want your like slightly condescending thought piece. The weather conditions prevailing in an area over a long period. Yeah. Wait, the rest is just him talking? I can't engage with somebody's thoughts if I don't see all of the context for it or like what he follows it up with. Because does he follow up something that like makes sense, or is he just like saying all of climate is everything and so their models? I mean, there's some reality that like, yeah, most climate scientists would agree that their models don't encapsulate everything that is going to affect climate. But the clipping is kind of cringe. His communication skills are awful. I would argue he's definitely not a rhetorician. Yeah. He means climate models have very many variables in order to perform dimensionality reduction to get a model. You have to choose which variables you include and don't include, which makes it everything equals all variables that play in. Okay, that's kind of what I thought he was talking about. And I think this is an issue, right? Is that he's definitely actually, so he's very much like an academic, and now he's kind of an embittered academic. So he tends to be this mixture of really careful language that's very like almost like manicured, which is what academics do because we're really, really concerned constantly with being misconstrued. And a lot of people who get into these public space spheres are good rhetoricians. Like they're good at saying, clearly not like myself. They're good at saying what they mean, right? And they're pretty quick about it. So overall, I've been less impressed with Jordan Peterson since he's come back from his like health issues. But that doesn't make me want to dismiss him outright because I think like when it comes to like life, it seems evident that he's helped a lot of people and he hasn't gone into like the dangerous territory of like ethics. Goddamn climate changes every day. What do you mean? Last week it's sub 30s and now it's mid 50s. Fair enough. The glasses are on, baby. Time to get serious. Yes. I'm zooming in on the problem. Be just a fucking statistician. Yeah, which is why, like, because he's a statistician, to be honest, like, he's not going to be dumb, right? I think people who want to dismiss Jordan Peterson is just being like, he's just dumb. I'm like, there's no fucking way he's dumb, right? Which means we have to give it the benefit of the doubt of, like, something's going on here. Now, it is possible that since his, like, health problems and everything, that he's actually not cognitively performing at the levels that he used to. It's possible. I haven't watched a lot of his newer stuff, and I haven't been, like, overly impressed, whereas I was much more impressed with his previous stuff. In my opinion, it's the actual opposite. He's a great public speaker. I keep missing your thing. But the content itself is kind of bad at times. Interesting. I've heard a really mixed responses to Jordan Peterson's speaking style. I find myself, I actually have a hard time with it sometimes. Like I have a hard time following it because he like builds this narrative. He like builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, and then he like makes a point. And I find I get lost in the building sometimes, right? Especially because I'm so focused on the trees, not the forest, that I'm like focusing on every little detail that he's saying, that I kind of feel like every detail that he's using to build is a point in and of itself. And so I get lost in that. Whereas I know other people who are like, oh my gosh, I love how Jordan Peterson speaks. It's like super easy to engage with. Science can be dry sometimes. Yeah, there's people who mix. So like saying firmly he's a terrible communicator or he's a good communicator is unclear. The fact that he's been a clinician for a long time suggests to me that he's probably at least figured out how to communicate a little bit. It's hard to be a psychotherapist if you can't communicate at all. Why do you think he's worth listening to with respect to climate science? I don't at all. I don't. I would say his opinion as like somebody who can read statistics is maybe somewhat valuable, but I wouldn't take him as like a environmental specialist. Like I wouldn't weigh his opinion any heavier than any other basically layman having an opinion on climate change. That's basically my view. I don't take his position on specifically climate change. It's just the clip that came up. I don't know, outside of his self-help, he has propagandized his morality onto vulnerable men. He's propagandized onto vulnerable men. I guess then what do you do with all of the men coming forward saying that he's like saved their lives and like dramatically improved it? I think like my biggest critique of Jordan Peterson is he's kind of fixated with like kind of like the white goal of life, which is like fundamentally like competence, success, and like the climbing like the social somewhat capital hierarchy. And I just like the main issues I'm like, I think there's just more to life than that. Like, I don't like his take on like happiness, where he thinks like happiness is really shallow, it's not very important. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, everyone in the fucking 21st century, even in their conquest to climb the competence hierarchy and get the best paying job and make the most money and all these things, they're doing it because they want to be happy. And they don't mean happy in like the shallow way, but to some extent they do, of just like the fleeting emotion, but they mean like genuine contentedness. Like it's actually deeply related to like the conversations with Reckful and Dr. K of like he's trying to figure out how to be content and happy, but in like that kind of eudaimonic way. There's a longer clip on YouTube. It's like 5 minutes. If you type Jordan Peterson's climate, the channel is called Jordan Peterson's Notes. Okay. He's smart, but he got reeled into the intellectual dark web and just as of the political leaning that denies climate change or at least resists actions on climate change and is railing on green energy a lot. He's very smart, but he's not above ideological bias. Of course, no one is going to be above ideological bias, which is why like with everyone you have to like take them in stride. But I think like the railing hatred that he gets outright, especially when people try to dismiss his like psychological takes, is very strange to me, because I would argue like if anything his psychological takes have some merit because he's an expert in it, and he's not just an expert in it, but he's a tried and true expert. He was a U of T tenured professor with 17,000 citations. Like he's not nobody, you know. Back to this, just seeing if he posted anymore. No. We're getting on a random side tangent. Climate change. Okay.
Change one is a weird one. So that
well,
one.
That's because there's no such thing as climate, right? Climate and everything are the same word. And that's what bothers me about the climate change types. It's like, this is something that bothers me about it technically. It's like, well, climate is about everything. So, okay. But your models aren't based on everything. Your models are based on warming. A set number of variables.
Yeah.
So that means you've reduced the variables, which are everything, to that set. Well, how did you decide which set of variables to include in the equation if it's
Probably
about
the most
everything?
predictive.
And that's not just a criticism. That's like, if it's about everything, your models aren't right. Because your models do not and cannot model everything.
What do you mean by everything when you say?
Well, but that's what people who talk about the climate apocalypse claim in some sense. We have to change everything. It's like everything, eh? Okay, what? And the same with the word environment. That word doesn't mean it means so much that it actually doesn't mean anything. Like when you say everything, in a sense, that's meaningless, right? Because, well, what are you pointing to? Well, I'm pointing to everything. Well, what's the difference between the environment and everything? There's no difference. What's the difference between climate and everything? Well, there's no difference. So this is a crisis of everything? It's like, no, it's not. Or if it is, well, if it really is, then we're done because we can't fix everything.
Well,
but we have
specifically-
to. The fastest way to make the planet sustainably green and ecologically viable is to make poor people as rich as possible, as fast as we possibly can. Because the thing about poor people is that, well, first of all, they're not resource efficient. They use a lot of resources to produce very, very little outcome. And so that's a problem. Slash and burn agriculture, for example. But even more importantly, when you're insecure on a day-to-day basis, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you're not paying attention to the broader environment, that hated word, around you. Mm-hmm. And you can't even really worry about your children's future in some real sense because, like, no, you don't understand. Lunch is the future. We don't have lunch, we're hungry, and that goes on for like a month, we're dead. That's the future. So what happens, if you can get resources to the poorest section of the population, as soon as they get to the point where they have some hope of a genuine future, especially for their children, they immediately become concerned about broader environmental consideration.
Okay, well, that's actually from my understanding, and I am purely a layperson when it comes to like psychology and environmentalism, but from the like few studies I've read, there is definitely a connection between poverty and environmentalism. That it's kind of like the Maslow's hierarchy. As you have your basic needs met, you have more capacity for transcendence. I think he's confusing the weather climate and the general sense of the world climate or something. I mean, I think he's trying to talk about climate change at the world level, in what climate change people are talking about. And so fundamentally, everything contributes to that a little bit, right? Even like cow farts. And so he's saying, well, what do you reduce the model to? And I'm going to be honest, I'm not super deeply familiar with climate science. It's not something I'm like personally super passionate about beyond like doing my part. But, and calling out like countries like China or like major like industries that are like damaging the environment majorly, right? But it's like not something that I'm going to pretend I'm like super passionate about because we can't be passionate about everything, mostly. Not effectively, at least. Like in my mind, if you're passionate about something, then you're also doing something about it, right? And I do like the basics of like composting and like recycling as much as I can and taking in like even doing the like extra part of like driving to like the eco recyclings for like recycling like really like obscure like technology and stuff like that. Trying to like reduce how many like single wrapped things that we use, you know, like the basic stuff. Ooh, there's a fight blowing up in my chat about Jordan Peterson. Feels like everyone either loves him or hate him so much for rhyme or reason. Yeah, and like I think we have to be like careful. This is Julia Gale of Columbia U of Stats major talking about what she calls, oh, your link is getting blocked. If you join my Discord, or even if you want, I'll post my, I'll even give you guys my, I don't really mind giving you guys my my username like number. You guys can just send me the link because none of my links are coming through. That's a lot of paragraphs, not your usual Twitch chat. Yeah, we're getting brought up Jordan Peterson. I didn't even bring him up. One of you guys brought him up. Just to be clear, I didn't start this just before anyone's being like, oh, there's Erudite talking about Jordan Peterson again. No, I didn't bring him up. I was talking about Dr. K. You guys brought him up. Not that I'm blaming you guys, which is fine. Just before somebody thinks that I'm just constantly bringing up Jordan Peterson, I'm responding to chat. Narvis, it's your fault. Naughty. Everyone poggies him. If you want someone to tell... my chat is loading so fast I can't even read these large things. Yeah, for sure, but the empirical reality is that richer nations consume more and produce more greenhouse gases, although now it's decreasing, mainly middle income nations. My understanding is that that's not true. Let's look it up. My understanding is that the major producers of all pollution, including greenhouse gases, is broadly poorer nations like with high population density, like China and India, I believe, are the major two countries that contribute the most, but I could be wrong. Watch me fucking eat my foot here. International, what are the words to search? Greenhouse gas emission ranked by country. I probably don't need international here. I'm just getting esoteric. I just want to say big words like Vosh, okay? 10th. Canada is 10th. Good to know. Google needs to relax on giving me such. I'm going to just like constantly dox myself with Google. I need to actually just make a separate Google account. By country. 2021. Okay. So the worst. This is the worst map. Okay, so the dark ones have the least. And then the most similar colors have the most. So China unquestionably has the most. And it looks like America's the next one. This is a terrible colored map. Let's find a better one. I think it's China, though. Sure, let's try Wikipedia. My friend Wikipedia. Okay, yeah, China, and then it's actually United States, and then it's India. So, it's neither what I said nor what you said. It's a bit of both. I mean, China is destroying. I mean, it's more than double. And then they have all of the EU. And then it's Russia. Interesting. What do you guys think about that? So there's population density going on here with these two, in part. Including land use. Okay, and then America's taken the cake there. Production-based emissions, excluding land use and land use change. So this is just absolute raw production. Yeah. Consumption-based emissions. The rankings are pretty close again. And they don't have any for land on here. Interesting. What do you guys think about that? Funny they lumped the EU together. I know, it's just like all of the EU. And it's like, there's no variation here. Okay. When India starts infrastructure building. Yeah. China's having a lot of trouble with giving up coal. Okay. Is that from the... You can tell it's almost midnight because I can't even remember the most important historical event in Chinese history in the last like 100 years. I swear I'm smart. Maybe I'm not. I don't need to be smart. It's fine. Mao's policy. Mao's industrialization. What was his industrialization policy? What was it called? The Great Leap Forward! Ah! I'm sorry, I just destroyed you guys' ears. Yikes. This is what I mean. When my brain gets tired, it gets not very smart. The Great Leap Forward. Thank you. The Great Leap Forward 5-year plan. Same thing. Is that why? Okay, so my question was, is the reason why they're having a hard time getting off coal because in large part in the Great Leap Forward they did a lot of coal mining and coal like industry building? That was my understanding in part of the industrialization. It wasn't only, but that Mao really motivated a lot of extra like coal mining and coal industry. I wish I knew how to quit you. I'm Canadian. I know the bill. His point was that if you went against the bill long enough, you'd eventually get fined. And if you didn't pay those fines, you'd eventually get in prison. Mandated speech. I get it's a long shot, but he's being a contrarian. But his point was that this was the first time history in the speech would be mandated. Well, it's specifically that it's mandated in that, like, you must say these words. It's not mandated in an exclusive way. So there's certain mandates around language that say you can't say certain words, like hate speech, stuff like that. And he was concerned because it was the first time that it was an inclusionary list. So it was, you can only say these words, which is actually a lot more limiting than excluding certain words, because that means unless it's those words that you've that are in your included list, nothing else gets can be used, right? So it reduces the generative nature of language. I believe that was precisely what his argument was. Now, you can have opinions on whether or not that's valid or true, or whether the risk outweighs the benefit, blah, 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 blah. But I think that's what Jordan Peterson was specifically saying, from my understanding. No, they have a tough time because they are much poorer than Western nations and rely on cheap energy to grow economically. Yeah. Maybe this is a better representation of CO2 emissions. If you put it in my Discord and tag me in it, I will look at it. I got a friend request. Sorry, I will respond so you can send it to me. Or you can just hop in my Discord. There's people in there. There's some beautiful art being posted. It's actually really good. There's some actual art getting posted that people have made. That's impressive. So you can check that out. Hello Paradol is typing. Check our DMs. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jacobus. Just change the rule, because I have no problem with links being in chat at all. Obviously, if you start linking like Pornhub and a bunch of like stuff that I don't want on here, then poo-poo on you. I'll probably just mute you, to be honest, because then you just ruined the fun for everyone. Oh, great. This is a much better one. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to copy this link because it always tries to pull up these new links on the web page I'm not streaming to you guys. Okay. This is a list of carbon emissions. Okay, so as it gets more red, this is a much better map. Holy moly. Can I... Okay, let's see. This is not a bigger version of it. I just want a big version of it. Number 3. Okay, so Saudi Arabia is number 7. Not surprising since they're doing a ton of oil there. Number 9 is the United States. Canada's 12th. Again, oil. Kazakhstan is 10th. Interesting. Per capita, China's at only number 41. Okay. Per capita. Interesting. So then the question comes, do we care about the per capita? Because per capita doesn't account for the fact that big industry is largely the major contributors to emissions. So does per capita evaluations matter as much for CO2? Because in a lot of ways, in my view, my understanding of like environmentalism and like wanting to be environmentally sound is that like the individual isn't the one who matters. So the per capita isn't what matters. It's about those industries responsible for the most, which is private businesses usually. Enhance. 1 second, I just need to do... I'm sure you can understand, though on an empathetic level, that it's one of the most frustrating things ever that anytime queer people are about to take a step forward in gaining the same rights as other people, someone stands up and makes some esoteric argument that this is going to destroy society. The same thing happened with gay marriage. People argue it's an attack on the family. Should be possible negatives. Yes, I think that this is like a really legitimate thing. It's hard not to see it as an attack on queer people just because he has these ideological bases. I definitely can understand that. Yes, I can understand that. I think what's important that is oftentimes missed, and I could be wrong on Jordan Peterson, but my understanding is Jordan Peterson was explicitly clear that he would always use correct gender pronouns for anyone as long, like at an individual level. Like, absolutely, he wasn't against pronouns at all. He was specifically for mandated speech, and if the mandated speech had been about anything else, he would have had an issue. Now, that is taking him at his word. That could be false. He could have a bias. But I think there's also a really legitimate concern that you bring up there, and that part of why this whole topic blew up so much is because there is so many strong feelings around transgenderism, and there's so many LGBTQ and queer topics that get really, really inflamed really quickly on both sides, okay? There isn't one side that is dominantly responsible for it, but I think, like, as somebody who's got lots of family and friends who are queer, I definitely have a heart for the legitimate struggles. And the problem is, like, how do you figure out how to like legitimize these things and also talk about like pros and cons in the conversation, right? It's not easy to answer because you do remember making that point. That's good. Can anyone get me a Discord link? Somebody will definitely get you a Discord link if it's not in my channel, which it might not be. But all that to say of basically Skylar, is that it is definitely important, and I think the problem is that a lot of his rhetoric got used actively against trans individuals, which was never what he intended. Because in his first video, which again I get that he doubled down, so we can have that conversation after. In his first video, he obviously never meant to go viral. He was just arguing about C16, right? The issue is that a lot of people who are very anti-trans use that, and I think there's a lot of trans individuals and queer individuals who just have a hard time fighting to just be like treated like another human being, which really sucks, right? That is just something that is obviously awful. And I really appreciate Skylar, like you're like being super like reasonable about this, which is like almost always actually my experience when I talk with like trans community members. The problem is that like lots of allies and lots of people start using trans issues on the left or on the right to kind of stand on basically like your guys' like actual like proverbial like graves of suffering to try to drive their ideological point. And I think that that's a really big problem. And I don't know what to do about it, because like I have a really big heart actually for trans issues. I have a lot of people in my life who are trans, that I really, really love. And I think it's like such a legitimate area of pain for a lot of people. And I just don't know what the solution is, because like we have to be political about your guys' things, because you guys have been actively politically like oppressed, like gay marriage and stuff like that. But as soon as something becomes political, it fucking turns to shit really quick, and there's really divisive views on it, and then there's no nuanced conversation, right? And I think that like I don't know how to answer these questions, in large part because I get extra careful around trans topics, because I would never want to be like, I genuinely don't think Jordan B. Peterson, the music's too loud, I'll turn it down for you guys. I genuinely don't think that Jordan B. Peterson ever intended like harm, right, when he first started doing this, and he definitely never wanted to harm trans individuals. It happened kind of as a sequelae, and you could argue, well, did he double down on it, right? And that's like, yeah, he pushes back in only one direction, right? And that's why I want to be really careful of being like, anytime I talk about trans topics, I want to be really, really careful that the people who I know who are harming and like actually being like toxic towards trans individuals are not being inflamed by what I'm saying. That's like the last thing that I want, and it's why talking about trans topics is something I try to do like the most delicately, not the most, but I pay particular attention to it, right? I try to be exceptionally careful about it, because there's so many people looking for any opportunity basically to like abuse the conversation. Yeah, I've noticed chat has dried up. If you guys have thoughts on that, let me know. I mean, if there's trans people who are being like, that's not helpful, let me know, because I genuinely care a lot about this topic. And so as somebody who's like, I'm not going to say an ally, because I think people who call themselves allies often abuse the actual topic, right? People who are like feminist allies often just abuse feminism, stuff like that. Being honest, I agree with you that I don't think he intended harm. Very few people actually intend harm, but I personally think he didn't care. I don't think he particularly cared if he did harm or not. He was way too locked in his view by the time it all blew up. Probably, yeah. And I think particularly when it comes to the C16, because he got so attacked and so misrepresented a lot of the time, that he became even less sensitive, because I think he became like kind of embittered towards that position, which is like tragic. It is understandable from a human level, but we always expect more from our public figures, right? Like, being human isn't excusable sometimes, which makes anyone in the public eye, it's very intimidating for them. But you get so many benefits and like privileges by being like in the public eye and having a big following and having a lot of people listening to you, that I think the like level of like intensity that we have with them sometimes is sometimes valid, right? I'm not saying that I agree with like cancel culture and all that shit. But I think like us having really high standards on major public figures is really important because they have so much weight behind their voice and they can do so much good or bad even if they don't intend it. It's kind of like being a leader. Like my view of leadership is fundamentally like it is everything is your responsibility even if you had nothing to do with it, which means even if something went wrong, one of your employers messed up, even if they did something that you explicitly told them not to or anything, it is fundamentally still your responsibility because you are the one with the power and some of the privileges, and with great power comes great responsibility, as Uncle Ben said, right? And it's like so true. DM'd you on the Discord, Julia Galef in the Graph of Despair. Okay. The ship sailed on that given the average celebrity figure. That's true. That's true. Very true. But we should still try to expect more. That's why like I try to fangirl over researchers. I've always had a good experience fangirling over researchers. And then I get to talk to them. Actually, all my like most favorite researchers I've actually gotten a chance now to talk to, which is super cool. And it's the weirdest experience because I don't really fangirl over people. And then I like get like to have a meeting with some like old person who like studies like nature positivism and stuff like that. Pollyann Passmore is her name, and I was just like awestruck the whole time. I appreciate the pushback, by the way, Mindfurry. I think you were pretty reasonable with your view on him. I'm just more emotionally invested in disliking him on a personal level. I honestly wish he wasn't so inflammatory because him being able to continue his work in psychology would have been actual good for the world. Honestly, Skylar, that's a really respect-worthy position in and of yourself. I think you're like handling a conversation that is deeply personal for you really well, which I can respect a lot. That seems like an environment that selects for certain types of person and not the one you're looking for. Which kind of environment? The one where we expect more out of like leaders and public figures? Yeah, I like to talk to researchers. But they're never willing to ever be spicy. So any like video interviewing them is never going to go big because they're not willing to play the rhetoric game at all. Like they will do everything in their power not to. Okay, let's look at this stuff that I was sent. Why are we poles apart on climate change? Okay. Let's get off this. Ooh, a Nature article. Okay, the problem isn't public's reasoning capacity, it's the polluted science communication environment that drives people apart. Boom! Right there. Understandably anxious to explain. Media has discovered a new culprit, the public. I hate when the media blames the public. Like, you're the media. It's your fucking fault they think this shit half the time. I feel like if I was unable to stay calm and empathetic with someone on the internet, then I sure shit would not be good at my job. You must be in like the help field or something like that. Did you say Jordan Peterson's comments about trans people in his talk with Ben Shapiro? I think that's as controversial as I've seen JPB on the topic. I have not. I haven't watched the Ben Shapiro, mostly because I think I can understand why he didn't push back more on Ben Shapiro, because I find Ben Shapiro very slimy. He does a lot of like gross rhetoric, and I don't like it. And I find he's very, very dishonest for his ideological point of view. Which, in fairness, there's lots of people on the left that do that shit too. But I also find them slimy, just to be clear. I wish Jordan Peterson would have pushed back on Ben Shapiro more. But Ben Shapiro has been particularly nice to him. And so I think that's why he didn't. So I can, like, again, at a human level, I can understand it, but I think a lot of Ben Shapiro's ideas need to be pushed back on. And if he was going to respect anyone's position, anyone pushing back on him, it would be Jordan Peterson. And so it's like one of the situations where, like, I totally understand, especially if you're, like, an agreeable person by nature, to not want to, like, create a conflict with somebody that you at least have positive rapport with. Oh, so basically I screamed out all day and he started attacking me. Wow, you and I would probably have lots of stories to share with each other, except I don't work with neurodevelopmental disordered kids. I just work with kids who've been like high risk their whole lives, like gangs and stuff like that. But similar screeching and stuff like that. Not anymore, actually. I got out of that, but Did I already go over the Dr. K stuff? For the most part, but I'm going to be talking to Mr. Girl about it, and that will be recorded and on YouTube later as well. So even if you miss it on the day, February 3rd at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, if you would like to come and watch, or 8 p.m. Eastern, if you don't want to do the math. So you can watch it live on February 3rd, or you can watch it on my YouTube channel within a week after that, where it'll be released, or probably on his YouTube channel. I think he posts most of his talks on YouTube. I might cop some flack here for this, but I definitely see similarities between Shapiro and Destiny. Whoa! He went there, guys. Get him. Just kidding. Don't do that. I would never encourage anyone to get him. A Spendo WoW, I'd be curious why. What do you see as a similarity? And while you guys chat about that, I'm going to turn the music up just a tiny little bit because I have to run and grab a drink of water super quick. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Get my nice... I don't actually need my blanket anymore. I was very cold when I came home because I had been sitting outside for like, literally like 5 hours. Yeah, you can come on. Do you guys want to see my partner come on camera? He's being shy now. Well, Destiny used to be a conservative. That's true, and then he became a super aggressive leftist. Perfect, thank you, Bastiny. Bastiny! That's funny. I get it now. I hadn't said it out loud yet. Awesome. Okay. Now is the time to say it. While DGG is so focused on someone else, I'm speaking more about their style of arguing, steamrolling people with fast talking, throwing out facts, using humor to belittle people who disagree, and speeding past the moment where their inaccurate takes are pointed out. Interesting. Here's the reason why I don't like Ben Shapiro and what I don't think Destiny does is Destiny doesn't use emotional guilting, shaming rhetoric very often. He very rarely does it, whereas Ben Shapiro goes to it almost first. Where he'll like, rather than talking about the topic, he'll be like, so what? You just want to like murder thousands of babies, right? And that's like a very like not honest take on pro-life arguments, right? Pro-choice arguments. Good, that's really funny. Oh, this is what your name's based off of. It's not like Bastiny, like Destiny, but based. It's based on Bayesian statistics, isn't it? A degree of belief in an event. Yes. Yeah. Let's find the article in here. Oh, okay. Let's give Julia, let's let Julia give her explanation of the graph. I already deleted it because I'm stupid. Okay. Who's ready for a stats lesson? Everyone's like, bye! Based. I would actually love to chat with you sometime. After seeing you on Destiny's stream, I was going to reach out to you anyway since we're both people working in psych and Canada. We figured we could have interesting. Please do message me, DM me, join my chat. I'm always willing to chat with people. Sometimes I get tired, but if you actually want to come on stream and chat too, just let me know. What's the Mr. Girl talk going to be about? He wants to talk about Dr. K, as you can probably guess. In fact, like all of the he wants to talk about the recful stuff. It kind of worked actually. LOL. He's mentioned a couple of times since then. I was trying to get into Bayesian thinking. Yes. The problem with Bayesian statistics is that it's very hard to. It's very counterintuitive, I find, in a lot of ways. We use Bayesian statistics a lot in forensic psychology, and even though I understand it enough when I read it to interpret things, trying to get me to explain it to people who aren't familiar with Bayesian statistics is a big nope. I can't do it. I'm like versed enough in statistics to understand it. I am not versed enough to then re-explain it, which is like the next level of expertise. I'm definitely not an expert in statistics. I would never want to even claim that because then people are going to like want me to like read statistics to them and I'm going to be like, I can read it for myself. And if I could just transplant from my brain into yours what I mean, that would be good. Don't worry, that time link is in fact correct. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to turn up the audio output so you guys can hear it. Tell me if I blast your ears.
All right, I have one last graph for you about soldier mindset, and it is one of the most important slides in this talk. It's also extremely depressing. Are you ready? I call it the graph of despair. Now, it's hard to see, but I don't hear anyone breaking out into sobs, so I'll have to explain why this is so depressing. This is a graph from a paper by Dan Kahan, who studies motivated reasoning at Yale Law School. And this is, again, a question about, is global warming happening? But the x-axis this time isn't years. It's your level of science intelligence, which Kahan defines as a mixture of scientific knowledge and numeracy, like do you understand basic math? And the more scientifically literate people are, the more their views are determined by their politics. And the reason this is so depressing is it means we can't just educate our way out of these problems. You know, a lot of people assume that the reason people disagree with each other about global warming is some people just aren't well informed enough. And this result, this graph of despair, just shows how easy it is, how thoroughly you can marshal evidence and logic to defend almost whatever you want, maybe even especially, you know, if you're especially intelligent and clever. The only solution is to want to get it right. At Yale Law
If you guys are confused by the graph, basically this is your science intelligence. If you look along the line, the further you are just along here means the more scientifically literate you are. So there are conservatives, obviously, that can be scientifically literate, or liberals. And what we're seeing is that you would expect as they become solidly scientifically trained that they would see a convergence in agreeing that there is global warming, but what we actually see is as people become more scientifically literate, they actually vary more in their opinions. That's what this graph is showing. Which is why, hi Taken! Which is why we can say appeal to authority is a bad idea. Just because you can find a researcher or a PhD or even multiple who say it, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. And we have to remember that in academia, there is an aggressive liberal overrepresentation. So even if you can find 10 PhDs saying one thing and only one saying the opposite, it doesn't actually necessarily mean that the majority is true. We don't want to engage in tyranny of majority. Either side could still technically be true if they have decent evidence behind. We just have to wait for more evidence to come out, and even then they'll probably still not agree. That's why I actually really dislike when people try to just appeal, and it's why I really try to avoid using my credentials alone. I was told after my Destiny talk that I downplayed my credentials too much and I sounded unimpressive. Which is fair. Would it make it more impressive if I told people I have a 3.93 GPA? Does that? And I've done I don't know how many credits. Too many credits in my undergrad for my undergrad. I did more than I needed, and then an entire graduate year. My cam is blocking the y-axis. The y-axis says the probability of agreeing. How was my birthday? My birthday was yesterday. It was really nice. I got the most delicious cake. It was so good. A good intro question to counterintuitive statistics. Oh. An individual has been described by a neighbor as follows. Steve is very shy and withdrawn, invariably helpful, but with very little interest in people or in the world of reality. A meek and tidy soul, he has need for order and structure and a passion for detail. Is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? What is my background? My background is in psychology. I have done an undergraduate honors degree in psychology, which means I basically did like half of a master's thesis. Mine's just on the 26th. My birthday is on the 28th. So super close. Very exciting. We're almost twins. I turned 28. It seems both sides of equal standing. I don't know what you're referring to. I think the issue is the red line is a very small sample size past 75. Yes, but that is in part because there isn't a lot of space in academia for conservative positions. They absolutely get bullied out of academia. And you might be like, absolutely not, but definitely they do. Yes, pretty pony. So this is your golden year. It is my golden year! Wow! I was a kid. When I was a kid, I used to be like, oh, it's so dumb that I was born on the 28th. It's going to take forever to get to it. And I didn't even realize it was a golden year until you said that. You're also 28? I'm literally 2 days older than you. You are my sensei then. Dan, that's really interesting. It's possible that this graph is evidence of critical thinking. If you actually teach people critical thinking, a lot would assume we solve our issues faster because the solutions become more apparent, but I've always thought more critical thinking risk diversity in fault rather than homogeneity. The problem is that I think you're right, and I think in part of what we're seeing in this graph is that the more scientifically informed you are, probably the more skeptical you are, and the more nuance is involved in it, which is why to say that there is solid evidence, if you're in a political leaning that you disagree, you are going to be more inclined to look for problems in the evidence, problems in the methodology, right? We do this all the time. If like some major study came out that like unequivocally proved some like pretty racist thing, right? Everyone on the left would be picking it apart to find faults with it because it opposes what they broadly view. That's why like I really like William James. He's got this great article. He's got a theory of thought called pragmatism, which he kind of introduces a fair bit in his one article. Oh, he's got an article called Pragmatism, but it's called A Will to Believe. And he basically talks about like, you're never going to believe in an idea that doesn't feel live to you, and that is purely like an emotional experience. Already had my golden year. Yeah, I feel bad for people born on like the 2nd, because then their golden years when they were 2, and they were barely like memorably conscious enough to enjoy it. I mean, they probably did enjoy it. Being 2 feels like, well, I guess unless you had like a horrible trauma when you were 2, and then you probably didn't actually enjoy it that much. This is really interesting. I'm probably going to finish this. Why our minds weren't built for truth. This actually reminds me a lot of research done by Jonathan Haidt as well. I need to go to sleep. Amazing stream. I had a great time. Goodbye, Skylar. Thanks for joining us. Thanks so much for having like open positions and being willing to engage on topics that are probably important to you, but also personal for you. I was born on the 1st. Your golden year was when you were 1. You probably had the most tasty breast milk possible. So I'm just going to clip that, and I'm going to look like a freak. It's interesting that Liberal Democrats are almost 100%, while Conservatives are just under 25% instead of near 0. It is interesting. Read the DMs before I end stream. Sounds good. Everyone say goodnight to Skylar. Good night. Critical thinking has to go through your ego. People aren't really... Yeah, and the more scientifically trained you are, the way more ego you're going to have connected to it, right? As somebody who's like scientifically trained, if I turn out to be like really wrong about something that I'm pretty solidly convinced on, I'm going to have to eat my foot so much more because so much more of my identity is actually wrapped into my scientific ideas, right? Why you got a caveat being 2 years old, damn academics. I feel like that's a broad conclusion to make from one graph though. be interested to me. Yeah, it is a broad conclusion. But I imagine that like it isn't just one graph. This is like the graph to represent like the like the most important point of the research. But I imagine like there's more nuance in her actual like thesis. I don't know what she is. An expert on rationality, judgment, and strategy. Interesting. Why you think you're right even if you're wrong. Yeah. She reminds me a lot of Jonathan Haidt, which you should definitely read if you're ever interested in like conservative and liberals within academia and stuff like that. He's got lots of really interesting work. In fact, to the point that he won't talk about it anymore because he's tired of people fighting at his talks. Yeah, Richard Dawkins says a lot of shit that I'm like, you might be right about biology, but you don't know people very well. Scientists love being wrong. Most don't. Like, not really. Especially any scientist who gets, like, publicly involved because then they're, like, worried about being, like, ashamed if they're wrong. Golden Years was probably painting yourself gold and screaming at Jordan Peterson. That's what I'm going to do in my golden year, actually, is paint myself gold and find Jordan Peterson personally and scream at him. I don't know what I'll scream because I don't have that like too much rage, but I'll find something. Maybe I'll just scream trash goblin and he won't know. Am I implying he's a trash goblin? Am I saying I'm a trash goblin? Am I just psychotic and screaming trash goblin in front of his house while painted in gold? Probably that's what he'll assume, but you never know. The world is your brain and you have to look at your biases. True. That's why I like Dr. K. He's very much aware of this, and his happiness view is a detachment from the ego. Yeah, he's got a very sorry, I get a cough. The Rona. Just kidding. He's got a very, from my understanding, he appeals a lot to Buddhism, if I'm not wrong. I'm not totally sure, but sorry, I keep coughing. I do apologize it. She has it. Good thing I'm locked. I don't have it. I was outside in the cold all night, and it's very, very dry out in Alberta right now. Like, February is like the driest, coldest month for us, so my throat is just like, I chugged this glass of water. On adult ADHD, what do you think? Oh, thanks for watching it. I appreciate that. My boss was like, "Hey, did you notice we had a huge jump in watches on ADHD?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I like mentioned it on like some of my like private social media stuff." And she's like, "No, I doubt it was from that." And I was like, "Okay, fair enough." Can you post the link to this video in the Discord? Are you talking about the link to the video I was just watching? Because I can definitely do that. Or you're talking about the adult ADHD one, because I can also give you that. But you're going to get this one first. Boomers. Yeah, I know. Okay, what do you think about sympathetic nervous system dominance in ADHD? Is HRV a good metric to indicate SNS dominance? I haven't. So when I was doing research for ADHD for this video, I was really trying to focus in on the clinical elements of ADHD. My main researcher that the camp that I appealed to was Stephen V. Farrawan. He's a really, really big ADHD researcher. So I got a lot less into the neurological stuff mostly because when it comes to like the neuroscience of ADHD, it's like every single year there's like new stuff coming out, and sometimes it feels like it's contradicting the others. Like, it's just, neuroscience is kind of exploding right now in general, and I'm decently trained in neuroscience, but I'm by no means a neuroscientist, and so sometimes I get a little bit like overwhelmed, and I'm like, okay, I know all these different parts, we're saying all of them, but some of these parts, from my understanding, like work counter action to these parts, so if they're both being effective, what does that actually mean, like at a practical level? So is HRV, when you say HRV, I'm coming up with a vehicle. Heart rate variability. That's what you're meaning, right? Is heart rate variability a good measure of sympathetic nervous system dominance? I don't know. Let's look it up together. heart rate variability and sympathetic dominance ADHD. Let's try this. Okay, what we want to look for, so this is a pilot. I don't really want to study a pilot if I can avoid it. Symbolic dynamics of heart rate, promising tool. Okay. Is more explorative. So we've got a pilot. Okay, so it looks like probably we don't know much about it. If there's only a pilot and an exploratory, a promising tool, right? So these are both very exploratory. Oh, tiny font. I'll zoom in for everyone. Okay, so we aim to measure this in ADHD using this. We examined 29 boys and 25 healthy boys. I wish their sample size was a little bit bigger, but fair enough. ECG was recorded in 3 positions, baseline, supine position. Okay. ECG doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but I don't think it will matter for the results. Importantly, okay, so let's see. The results showed that HRV complexity was significantly reduced at rest. Let's highlight this because I'm going to get lost. And during standing position in ADHD group compared to controls. Was higher during all posture positions and was significantly lower to standing. Okay, but why does that matter? I don't know enough about heart rate variation in different positions to know why this matters. Okay, so it was lower in standing in boys suffering from ADHD. Importantly, ADHD symptom inattention positively correlated with OV%, which is negatively correlated with NCI. Where's NCI? Standing position. And you concluding, symbolic dynamics reveal impaired complex neurocardiac control characterized by potential cardiac beta overreacting invader deficiency at rest to posture changes in boys suffering from. Okay, so there's definitely some promising cardiac biomarkers in ADHD. This is the important line here. If you're like, I don't know what all these numbers and words mean, this is what matters the most in this article. Very interesting. Okay, let's look at the other one. Keep that one up. There's so many more people doing free source, which is great, so we don't have to rip them off of a... Where does the ADHD video live? Good question. Let me pull it up for you. If you go YouTube and you go adult ADHD mental help Adira, give this a shot. This is my work. That's me with blonde hair. I guess unless you think that I'm wearing blonde, that I have blonde hair right now. Maybe it's a wig. You'll never know. It's not a wig. I'll tell you when it's a wig. I don't really care if you know if I wear a wig. I feel like most intelligent people are the most attached. Like ASD not having much vested interest in people. So it's kind of a misnomer. A lot of people, so there was the theory of mind that argued that people with autism had less like emotional care and empathy and stuff like that for people. It seems to be broadly disproven. It's not that they don't have empathy or that they don't care about social like engagement. It's just that they engage in it very differently and they attend to it very differently. Broadly, it's been disproven that ASD people are going to have impacted stuff like that. Are you saying, yo, what to my hair? Yeah. Potential to diagnose ADHD with cardiac biomarkers. Yeah, so basically there's some belief, my understanding is that there might be an over-aroused sympathetic system because so here's the thing, right, is anything that has regular disruptions to circadian rhythms like ADHD, so a lot of people with ADHD tend to fall asleep much later and they wake up much later in the day. Their circadian rhythm is actually not perfectly aligned with the day-night cycle that people without ADHD have. So it's possible also that we're going to see cardiac circadian rhythms that differ in them as well. Not really sure why. At least I'm not, because this is definitely not my specialty. But it's very interesting. If it isn't, it's too much sensory to attend to. So they won't attend to it and not have much views. Sometimes. What does that mean, though? Yeah. Narvis, what it means, is it Narvis? Yeah. What it means is basically we might be able to we might be able to get a biomarker for ADHD, which is really important because there's a lot of people being diagnosed with ADHD as adults that we think might not actually have a neurodevelopmental form of ADHD. They might be developing basically some sort of environmentally caused attentional and hyperactivity problems in adults that is separate from the much more genetic form of ADHD that we typically see from childhood into adulthood. So it would be a really, really important thing for accurately diagnosing ADHD because, to be honest, unlike autism spectrum, we don't have great tools for diagnosing ADHD. Usually it's like a conversation with a psychiatrist, but the problem is that a lot of people with like anxiety and all sorts of other disorders can often look like ADHD. So if you treat somebody with anxiety with ADHD medications, they might focus better, but they're also going to have a lot more anxiety symptoms, probably bodily ones particularly, right? So the treatment is not going to be very effective, especially because ADHD doesn't benefit distinctly from therapy as much as something like anxiety does, right? You can't like therapy somebody out of not having ADHD. You can therapy them on like some of the emotional dysregulation that can come up with ADHD individuals, like teaching them emotional regulation skills and stuff like that. But anxiety can be treated highly effectively with therapy, right? So if you're treating them with a stimulant for ADHD, well, then you're not doing effective treatment. Meaning symptoms similar to ADHD brought on by like TikTok or video games rather than genetics. Yeah, I mean, that's like a really reductionist way of viewing it. Like it might not just be like it might not be technology. Like it could be. That's definitely a reasonable argument to make, but it could be a million things, right? It could be that where you're giving people inflammatory processed food, which causes mass system-wide inflammation, which is causing maybe an epigenetic trigger for ADHD that all people have. We just don't know it yet, right? So it's like it could be a million things, but there's been some longitudinal studies that have come out that have shown that a lot of people who are diagnosed with adult ADHD never had symptoms of ADHD as a child, which means it's necessarily not the neurodevelopmental disorder that we're usually calling ADHD. It's probably something else, and the symptomology is probably a little bit different. CPTSD is often misdiagnosed as ADHD. CPTSD is not an official diagnosis at all. So a lot of people who do have childhood trauma will be diagnosed as ADHD because trauma in children particularly can look like attentional deficit problems. So that's another good example of basically something that isn't ADHD being misdiagnosed as ADHD because it's creating attentional or hyperactivity behavioral differences. Yeah. What if Alex Jones is right and hits the chemtrails? Probably is. Alex Jones is right about everything. I thought you guys knew that. I'm going to get that. Somebody should clip that too. Just that way I can make sure I make live stream fails as much as possible. Okay, here's another one. So this is a pilot study. What is their goal? Purpose. Okay. We hypothesize that there's an automatic dysfunction. Reduction in overall heart rate variability. Okay, so the first test, what they were doing is as you move between different positions, your heart rate is going to vary necessarily because your blood now has to be pumped in different orientations to gravity, right? So when you stand up, oftentimes from laying down, your heart rate goes up because now all of a sudden it's pushing all the blood that was just kind of pooling and moving back and forth up into your head. So I think that's what the first one is, from what I understand. But I'm going to be honest, heart rate variability is definitely like not in my scope, and so I'm for sure just being a layperson who like can read stats and it can guess at things. Sympathovagal imbalance. That's a fun word. Let's Google that word. I'm pretty sure I have a pretty good guess of what it is, but let's just diagnose. Here's the thing: you don't have to be smart. You don't have to know everything. You just have to be strategic in how you understand the world. Which means if you don't know a word, just look it up. It's fine. There's nothing worse than when people like get embarrassed when they don't know a word. That's why I try my best to like not talk with like super esoteric Vosh language, because oftentimes people will just disengage because they're like, oh, I'm too stupid to know what you're saying. And I'm like, no, you're not. I'm just too stupid to use simple words for you. I don't need to use such like complicated language to explain this concept. In fact, I would be more of a master if I could explain it in simple language. As you saw in my IQ conversation with Destiny, I am not a master of statistics. The concept of sympathetic balance reflects the autonomic state resulting from the sympathetic and parasympathetic influences. Okay, so what this is talking about is you have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic system, and they work in balance of each other. One of them is kind of your fight or flight response. It gets you really activated, really stressed out. The other one is your soothing system. It calms you down, it slows your heart rate, relaxes your muscles, whereas obviously the one that responds when you're stressed out increases your heart rate. So heart rate variability, I imagine, is in part going to be affected by this, in that they're looking at, what are they looking at specifically? This one. There's an automatic dysfunction, reduction in heart rate, overall heart rate variability, and there's an imbalance in basically parasympathetic versus sympathetic systems. So I imagine that they're hypothesizing specifically that they are I believe it's over, they are, what's the word I'm looking for? They're probably hypothesizing that basically people with ADHD tend to be on the higher end of the simple vagal system, where they're more like in fight or flight mode more often of the time. So they're more like in their sympathetic system more often of the time. The Feynman method of explaining is the best method. I don't know what that is. Oh God, I'll watch later on 0.75 rate speed. Godspeed, friends. That's fair. I'm too stupid to understand what erudite means. No, you're not. I'm too stupid to explain it to you. Used dictionary, the whole essay in school to the point that teachers can't understand it. Yeah. Giga Chad, people who only read the conclusion. If you don't read the purpose and you don't read the methods, then you can't know if the conclusion's even worth reading, right? If I read the methods and it's like, we did a narrative study on heart rate, I'm going to be like, I don't give a fuck about what you found. A narrative study is a terrible way to study heart rate, because a narrative study just like reads other literature and finds like patterns in it that just the researchers basically themselves distill as a pattern. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a pattern. It's just the pattern that the researchers feel, which is why I hate narrative reviews, which is why I hate sociology, because all they do is like narrative reviews and shit like that. It makes me angry. They do bad research. So you always want to read the methods. You want to look at the sample size population, right? Okay. 10. So sample size was 20. 10 control, 10 case. So 10 that they tested on. So really small. So we can't generalize this super well, and we can't do super good statistics on it. It doesn't mean that it's invalid. It's a pilot study, so it of course is small. But you want to be looking for a minimum sample size for quantitative studies, so studies that are using statistics and numbers, of 30. That's your bare minimum. And ideally you want to be like more like 120, okay? So always read your methods. Results are hard to read because then they just go into like researcher ooga booga, okay? Which is why if they have a conclusion, that's nice. What they concluded is that there is an autonomic dysfunction in children with ADHD. They have a reduced HRV. And yes, they have sympathetic dominance. Very interesting. So what that means is we might be able to diagnose ADHD based on both a collection of symptomology and also their HRV and their simple vagal balance, whether or not they're in fight or flight mode more often. So basically, it's kind of like it would kind of be similar to like doing a blood test. The HRV makes me nervous. Me too. But I think if you use HRV and more importantly the like sympathovagal imbalance, it's quite the word. There's a icebreaker word for you. Just next girl or gal or anyone that you meet that you want to hit on, you just go up to them and be like, hey, do you want to talk about my sympathovagal imbalance? And then they're going to be like, is that an STI? It's probably not going to go over well for you. But if you could use that on top of like other things, getting like any biomarkers for like a neurodevelopmental disorder or any diagnosis in psychology would be super helpful because it's dramatically going to reduce false negatives and false positives. Right now, if you go into psych, you'll get 0 biomarkers test ordered. Yes, absolutely, because there is no like protein of anxiety, right? We can't like test for anxiety and be like, do you have the anxiety protein? Everyone does. 3 or 4 easy tests to take, then you'd be solid. Yeah, you definitely don't want to just use HRV because there's probably lots of things that contribute to HRV variability, right? You want to use like HRV with the simple sympathovagal imbalance relationship advice stream. I'm going to, okay? We're going to do a relationship advice. We're going to do dating advice. But here's the thing. I am a cis-het woman. I'm all of them. Just kidding. I am a cis-het woman. I have never dated or pursued a cis-het woman. So I don't have much advice about cis-het women. And I hate it when women give men advice about how to pursue women because they've never done it. I don't know what works on women at all, especially straight women. I don't know. I've never pursued one, you know? So, when it comes to like relationship advice, particularly like pursuing dating advice, I will get my partner on here because I think broadly the men that you should listen to as far as like dating advice are the men who have been successful in getting like healthy relationships rather than just like some like random chick being like, I know what women want. And it's like, do you? How? Have you ever been someone pursuing straight women? Right? And obviously dating advice is tricky because all my LGBTQ friends feel left out, but I can't advise you because I've never been like queer and trying to date, or I've never like pursued a queer individual myself. We don't need advice about women. We all have SO. I don't know what that means. Best advice I got in life was from older married guys. Yeah, because they've done it. They've got the girl and kept her around. And particularly, you want to find people with like relationships that you respect, right? So, your chat are all chads with girls. Nice, good job, guys. SO. No, I know what SO means. I just didn't know what he meant specifically. Significant other, yeah. In general, though, I'm always willing to chat. I would also really love to have, if there is anyone who is like trans woman who wants to come on and talk about like dating life and experience and stuff, they're going to be able. Here's the thing. When it comes to dating, there is no data or evidence. I'm totally willing to talk about topics that I don't have personal experience in if I can find like data and information about it. But there is no good research on dating at all. And so to act like I'm going to be an expert on pursuing women or on a trans woman's experience or queer dating is ridiculous because there's almost no data about it and I don't have even lived experience. Not that lived experience makes you an expert either, but it's kind of like the best you got when you don't even have like research on it, right? That's my view, basically. So if there are like queer individuals or anything, I'm totally willing. On my TikTok, I actually had this great person who is like queer but also like has autism, and they gave like some really solid dating advice for people with autism, just talking about like explicit consent and what it needs to look like for them. So I'm really willing to talk about it. I mean, Twitch is ripe with girls in need of dating advice. Hey, if there are girls who want dating advice, I am super passionate about talking with women about dating and relationships. Listening to women is actually bad. Yeah, don't listen to women. We're stupid and we don't know anything. Just kidding. I am ASD and BPD dating a suicidal BPD. That sounds like a trauma bond. And that can be a really dangerous situation. Twitch is 90% girls. We're all just catfishing and pretending to be hot dudes, right, chat? Right. Just head on over to RFDs for all your dating advice needs. RFDS, that feels like not a place for good dating needs. And here's the thing. right? It depends on what type of relationship you're looking for, right? Like if you want a more traditional relationship, then there's actually a fair bit of advice about how to do pursuit for a traditional relationship. And when I'm saying traditional, I mean like traditional gender roles. So if you're like a guy who kind of wants to be the breadwinner, and you're kind of looking for a girl who wants to be like a little bit more like motherly and staying at home, broadly, to be honest, there's lots of advice out there. Just like watch like kind of older like lots of like Christian things, which I know is cringe, but they actually like give broadly good general advice for how really traditional relationships can work well, right? Because a lot of like the gender marriage, like the Christian marriage stuff especially, that are very traditional in their gender roles, talk about like things that broadly men in that traditional gender role need to work on, which is like emotional availability, stuff like that. And women, they kind of talk about like, hey, women, like don't take out all of your emotions on your partner. Like that's not a good thing to do. The problem is that in modernity, lots of people don't want a traditional relationship, or it doesn't work for them because they can't afford to be in a traditional relationship. So that's something I've thought a lot about, because I didn't want a traditional relationship. I wanted a much more egalitarian, modern relationship. And so that just led to a situation of kind of having to invent the wheel between me and my partner. So we've had to think about relationships a lot. I'm actually really passionate about talking about relationships and dating and consent, and like how to like properly like empower women to be like confident in relationships and like pursue men and all sorts of things, and like how to like teach men how to like talk and pursue with women. That's what my husband is going to talk about more. But yeah, I'm actually really passionate about it. So if you guys want to talk about it, we'll talk about it, because I think it's really important. At times I think touches more girls on this platform than guys. Really. Relationships aside, you said your hubby was trying to turn you into a gamer girl. What games has he got you playing? Problem is that he turned me into a gamer girl, like I'm on like Twitch, you know? But not that Twitch is gamer girl, but like a lot of girls don't even know Twitch exists, right? Like non-internet people don't really know much about Twitch. But problem is that we got into gaming, and I don't really like most of the games he plays, and he doesn't like any of the games I play. Which is, I really like survival solo RPG games a lot. He wants me to play League. He tried to get me to play League. I just don't like it. Tell him you're alpha and get him to do the non-nerd stuff. He does non-nerd stuff. I mean, he's like a fitness instructor and stuff like that. Yakko. Yes, I saw your thing. Yes, I saw your thing. I saw your message, Yakko. Don't worry, I got you. League is a great game. I like Ark. I really like Red Dead Redemption 2. I like Conan. Yeah, big Conan nerd. I really like RimWorld. It's very soothing. No one enjoys League. It's like an addiction for them. That's true. But I don't get addicted. I just get annoyed, and I don't understand it. I'm Challenger on League. I hate the game. I barely play it. Don't fucking play it. I won't. Are you on the DGG Rust server? No, I am not actually. I've thought about Rust. I've heard it's pretty fun. Maybe I should join. I played DayZ for a while. That's a pretty shit game. But I was on like an RPG server where mostly no one roleplayed. I just talked with people about like religion and stuff like that. Like I talked to like a bunch of like Israeli people and stuff like that. I don't like it. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. I don't like League. It makes me feel insecure because I tend to be like a decently like quick learner, and I get good at things really quickly, and I didn't get very good quickly at League because it's much more complicated, and so I got mad instead. I used to RP in Conan Exiles. Yeah. I kind of got into Conan after like most of the role-playing servers kind of died, and there's only like really intense erotic role-playing servers left, and that was the consent forms alone intimidated me. So I was like, this might not be my cup of tea. I just want to like ride weird animals and have lots of pets. Genshin Impact. Little your gambling addiction problems. I was really into Conqueror's Blade for a while, which is like made by a casino company actually. So I don't know if Genshin Impact is at all like that, but I was really into Conqueror's Blade, which has like a very high varied ratio reinforcement pattern. It's exploration based. Rust Rust has too much grinding in it, so if you don't like to play for a day, you get hours behind on the server. Yeah, that's a big thing for me, is I enjoy grinding, but I don't have time for it. So games that are like super high grind, I can't do it because I don't have time, because I work and now I'm streaming. So it's just like, what do I do? I don't know. Did you ever play Atlas? Yes! It's so good. And then it got destroyed by hackers, like instantly. One time, actually one of the mods, Yakko, got headshotted at the bottom of the ocean by this fucking player named Eat Meat 2, who, like, to this day we still talk about Eat Meat 2, which is funny. I always wonder, like, I for sure am not one. Subnautica, I did think about Subnautica, but I get stressed out with water things sometimes. I almost died at like doing like some deep sea fishing and stuff. Like actually almost died. So I don't know if I'd find it soothing. Whereas if I'm doing like solo survival, I actually like find it very soothing usually. Even like the scary spooky games. What's the like zombie or cannibal survival game? I forget what it's called. I played that a little bit. It was super fun. The game keeps going even without you. Yeah, that's what I heard. What would you say are all the things that fall under intelligence? So, at least for IQ testing, we test for processing speed, working memory, fluid reasoning, so that's like abstraction and stuff like that, verbal comprehension, and what did I did them out of order, which was a dumb idea. What did I should have done it from the beginning. Okay, there we go. Visual spatial. So we have, I'm going to do it in order. Verbal comprehension, visual spatial, fluid reasoning, processing speed, working memory. That's what we typically test for with an IQ. And those are kind of like the building blocks of major intelligences. So like if you look at like face your fears, okay, face the fish. Can you get pets though? I really like pets, which is why I was like obsessed with Ark. I'm actually kind of feeling Ark again. Like I'm kind of getting into an Ark mood again. That's the thing, is I find like 5 games and then I rotate in between them. But I'm in a Red Dead 2 mood right now. So I've been playing a lot of Red Dead 2, but just like solo. I don't like the online game. It's trash. But yeah, when it comes to intelligence, those are like the 5 primary factors that we look at that contribute to G. And then, so there's theories like multiple intelligences and stuff like that. The problem is that most of those multiple intelligences are better accounted for by G. They tend to be significantly less predictive of what we consider intelligence to do. And broadly, the like 7 intelligences of, it's not Stein. Stein did the 3 intelligences. Does anybody know which researcher did the 7 intelligences? It's got like kinesthetic, socio-relational. Ark 2 is supposed to come out this year. Oh, I'm really looking forward to Skyrim too. Oh, I loved Skyrim, like the solo RPG game, not the online. The online was okay, I just couldn't get into it. Sony. Gardner, thank you, it was Gardner. That's who it is. Something has been eating at me. As someone who's approaching 25, can you please explain the whole brain stops developing at 25 thing? Sure. So when humans are born, we're incredibly premature. The problem is that basically the vaginal cavity can't support our brains to get any larger. So we're basically like incubated for as long as possible before like it will break women's bodies. And pre-modern medicine still broke lots of women's bodies and they died in childbirth. Yeah, IQ stuff. We can go back into IQ stuff. I do mean Elder Scrolls. So... Oh, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Doesn't matter. It might have been interesting. If it was interesting. 25! Brain stops developing. Thank you. Nobody said it. I just noticed it, but... I'll still thank you guys. So basically what we figured out is that humans are born super premature. We're born with way more neurons than we'll ever need. And what basically happens is as you age, you prune those neurons. So your brain actually has more neurons than you need at birth. And development is essentially a process of getting rid of extra neurons that you don't need anymore. So by the time you turn 25, that's when your brain has fully stopped neural pruning itself and is now a mature brain. And so it's no longer any cell loss that happens after that isn't intentional, essentially. It's not like the natural process, it's like injury or like some other form of cell death. Did I lose that train too? No. Before that was the 7 intelligence, not 3. Did you lose it? I lose my train a lot because I have not been taking my attention meds because they were giving me short-term memory injury, and so I just stopped. As a myth, neuroplasticity goes on for all life, but it can be slower. So neuroplasticity has nothing to do with neural pruning, though. Neural pruning... Oh, you were talking about something else. Sorry. I should probably check your thread before so neuroplasticity and neural pruning are different, though, right? The brain finishes basically its maturing as far as pruning at around 25. For women, it tends to be about 21. For men, it's around 25 to 26. After that, you have a mature brain. And then at around like 65, 70, we start to see like a natural age deterioration where cells just start dying off from like essentially being too old. Neuroplasticity continues for the rest of your life. So even after 25, your brain can still change, but you're not building new neurons and you're not naturally pruning off neurons. You're just changing neural connections in your brain. In really extreme ways, sometimes it can even go as far as like you'll actually like lose certain neural pathways, but you're not having like full cell death, like a natural form of cell death after 25. What is the average IQ of Twitch viewers? No idea. Average IQ of gamers is usually higher than, so average IQ is 100. Oftentimes league players and like gamers are slightly above average. Same with like anyone who's got a college degree. So Twitch, you could argue if they're all gamers, they might be higher than average, but there's a lot of book readers on Twitch too, so hard to say. How many IQ points do you lose when you watch or play League of Legends? All of them. You lose all of them. Can you turn it down? Absolutely, I can turn the music down. Thanks for asking. Hopefully that is not too loud anymore. Okay, we got a bunch of questions. What do people usually misunderstand about IQ? Okay, well, most people think that IQ is not a real measure. They think that it is a scientific falsity. That is not true. The problem is that race realists took over IQ and made it unpalatable. And so people wanted to basically to dismantle race realists. They just tried to dismiss IQ as a study. The problem is that you cannot believe in the science of psychology and disregard IQ because it is most dominantly the most researched fact within psychology to date. And so if you disregard IQ, you should probably disregard all of psychological science. My friend's parents are both psychologists and resist going to therapy in general. How do we break this spell? You can't, right? You can encourage people to go, you can remind them that it's important to go, but fundamentally you can't force anyone to do anything. If people choose to go, that's great, and I hope that they choose to go. But I don't know how you force people to go to therapy. Pruning is getting rid of unused pathways. Yeah, it is. No, I like DGGers. They're usually really nice. I'm 169, that's why the average is so high. You alone are contributing to why it's so high. Everyone else is at like 70. Is it true that men are smarter than women? No, men and women have the same average IQ at least. Do you differentiate between crystallized and fluid IQ? What are ways people try to raise their fluid IQ? So crystallized and fluid intelligence is basically the difference between something like trivia knowledge, like semantic knowledge. So how do you put a car tire on? What is the capital of like Kazakhstan? Stuff like that. That's called crystallized knowledge. Whereas fluid reasoning is basically your capacity to like problem solve, for abstract reasoning, to kind of connect patterns where it might not be self-evident. Is there a way to raise your fluid IQ? Not really, not from what we know. The main way you raise any form of IQ is through education, good nutrition, and exposing yourself to as many new but positive experiences as possible. That's why I'm very pro world travel, because you experience lots of new things. If you've never tried meditation before, you should try it just for your brain, because it's good for your brain, but also it's a new experience. Aren't there problems with IQ, like how average continues going up? So that's called the Flynn effect. And so basically, as education improves anywhere, we see average IQ increasing. Oh, sure. If you guys are asking about like men and women in gendered IQ, their averages are the same, but their spread is a little bit different. So men tend towards the extremes of any phenotypic expression or polygenic. So anything that requires multiple genes is polygenic, and men tend towards the extremes. So there are going to be more people at both ends of like that extreme bell curve than in the center. Not more than in the center, but men have more extremes often than women, which is why on average when you see really extremely high IQs, they tend to be men, but also extremely low IQs tend to be men. But men and women still on average have the same IQ average, which is 100. So if you randomly picked a man and a woman from the population, you said who's smarter, I'd say I don't know. It could be either. 50-50. She's bullying the dropouts. We're too smart. You guys were too red-pilled. Red-pilled and based. Men have more Albert Einsteins, but they also have more Homer Simpson. Yes, exactly. Men are smarter and dumber. 2 sigma for school. Men tend towards extremes, mostly because of the XY. Basically because they have kind of that like weird little chromosome of the Y rather than a full X. They tend to have some polygenic expressions that are more extreme. So bringing up the penis, just read the stats. I don't think that will change the neurodevelopment, but you know, because I think testosterone and all that good stuff is still going to be there, and the chromosomes will still exist. Yes, women I think do have a higher standard deviation. Yes, they tend to deviate more than women. Is it true that if a man has a lower IQ than a woman, he is still smarter? No. I guess what do you mean by smarter at this point? MRI studies have discovered that developmental processes tend to occur in the brain in a back-to-front pattern, explaining why prefrontal cortex develops last. Yes. Brains definitely develop like back to front or like bottom up. Wouldn't be another way. Back to front is just because when we're talking about orientations, we originally use like the quadrupedal orientation where their heads are like this. So back to front for humans, if you're wanting like which structures develop first, it's kind of like a bottom up. It's considered back to front. Again, not super important why, but it's basically all these old structures back here, like your pons, your medulla, the like basic things for just like being not in a coma and breathing and having a heart rate. Those develop first, and then prefrontal cortex is the most complex and the most kind of unique to humans, the more newly developed structure, so that develops last. These studies have also shown that teens have less white matter in their frontal lobes. That's why teens have much less impulse control, because the white matter connections going up into your frontal lobe are very important for impulse control. And that myelin in the frontal lobe increases throughout adolescence. Yes, that is why teens tend to be impulsive. They do dumb shit all the time because their brains are just not fully developed. Women are so deviant. Sounds like you're saying women are so naughty. Women are so naughty. But it sounds like you're like turned on by that a little bit. Many of the experimentalists of evolution, we test the limits of natural selection at both extremes. So you were saying the Flynn effect is entirely explained by the rising level of first world education? More or less, yeah. We see Flynn effects in more exaggerated amounts in countries where they kind of suddenly get exposed to much higher levels of education within a generation. So somewhere like Brazil, we see a massive jump in IQ, in most part because IQ broadly seems to select for success in like highly complex, right? You're going to do better in a highly complex society with a higher IQ, because your IQ is going to determine how well you can respond to the complexities of the world, because you can process faster, you can retain more information, and you can kind of abstract and reason out patterns that other people might not be able to. So as you increase education, it in part trains that skill, and it's training it particularly when your brain is still pruning itself. That's why it's really important to bring in education for children. Yeah, so we're not humans until 25. Not what I'm saying, but sure. Are the internet links you've talked about this week listed on your Discord? Not usually. I mean, if you want, at the end of every stream, I can just post every internet link I have pulled up from the stream that day. I don't know which links you're referring to. If you're meaning like the articles in my Destiny chat, those are in, I believe I put them in research articles, usually under mental health and psych. Yeah, I put most of them there. I'm from Brazil. Nice. Brazil's a very nice country. You can exploit lower IQ people better. Yeah, sort of. Sort of, but gullibility isn't necessarily related to IQ, right? So you can probably con people with like really high esoteric language and stuff like that more easily, maybe, if they're low IQ. But like high fantasy proneness or gullibility, basically, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't see necessarily that it's strong. It might be somewhat correlated to IQ, but I imagine it's not super strong. Do you suggest dropouts with high IQ to use their abilities to scam and manipulate rich assholes? I never encourage anyone to scam and manipulate anyone. I think scamming people is kind of immoral, so no. When I'm sleep deprived, I reach a point where I am compelled to irritate those around me, and I find this quite amusing. What's going on in my brain? I don't know, maybe I don't know, hard to say. Maybe there's still like that young teen in you, just like wanting to find like simple satisfaction with like easy attention, even if it's negative. Have you seen that Jubilee video on IQ? Yes, it's so good, where that like awful woman is so condescending the whole time, and then she's at the bottom and she's so mad. It's so funny. It's a really good video. So what's the consensus on Dr. K? Tell me what to believe. Believe whatever you want to believe. You don't have to believe what I believe. I don't have a consensus on him yet. I think he's decently brave. I think he genuinely is intending good. The question is he doing good, basically? And this coaches thing is a little sus to me. I'm going to do some more research on it. I don't feel as good about it. Would be awesome. Absolutely. Spiritoby, they're going to be in my Discord then. I'll maybe just make a new section in the plebs that is just like a recap. I'll just make this channel right now, voice channel. Twitch stream links. I'll just date it and then post the links. Okay, I think, trying to think. Oh, I love the thing on DAD you did with Destiny. I totally support the view on amnesia. I totally had no idea about my traumas until my mom told me. Yeah, same. I was in like a really bad car crash when I was, not like really bad, but like a really intense car crash that like rolled. And I don't remember it after, I remember us spinning out, and I don't remember anything else. I don't remember getting home. None of that's there anymore. It's just not there, right? And that's like a pretty mild trauma. My brain tends to be particularly like, let's shut down and not remember things. But yeah, have a good night, guys. Whoever's leaving, I don't think gullibility has much to do with IQ. Yeah, I would doubt that they're strongly correlated. They're probably weakly correlated. I'd guess like 0.2, 0.3. Thanks, Greg. Good. You should watch more of him. He's definitely doing good. Yeah, I'm leaning towards he's doing good. I just like, I don't want to be biased even by like the hype around him. Not that the hype doesn't matter, because the fact that there's hype around him means something. I just don't want to like assume that he's doing good because of the selection bias of people who might comment on his stuff. And for what I've seen, he's overwhelming positive. I mean, he's definitely nice. He fits so many brushes with death. I know. I kind of joke that like the devil's trying real hard to kill me, so I must be doing something good in life. Not that I necessarily think the devil's trying to kill me, but yeah. Okay, so I think it is 1, so I'm probably gonna have to head off for tonight, but I want to give you guys an update of all of the upcoming talks that I have. So theoretically, Stardust and I are going to be talking Wednesday. I haven't reached out to her to check in in like a week. So I'm going to check in with her. Crooner's just like, you have to be smart to understand me. I'm sorry if I'm getting too like esoteric. It's not because you're not smart. It's because I'm not smart enough to explain it to you. And so if I am like speaking too esoterically, or I make like a joke that you don't understand, don't feel like you're stupid for asking for clarification. It just shows me that my skill at explaining things has room to grow. So I appreciate it, Crooner. Definitely makes me feel good to know I'm smart. But yeah. So just so you guys know what's coming up. What's coming up is I'm talking to Stardust on Wednesday, and I am talking to Mr. Girl, I believe, on the 3rd. I don't know if that's a Friday. I think that's a Friday. We're going to be talking no, that's a Thursday. So probably Star and then Mr. Girl. Yeah, Stardust is great. I'm excited to talk to her. We're going to talk about race realism. Yay! And how it's terrible. Then we are going to talk to Mr. Girl on Thursday. We're going to talk about Dr. K, but I'm also probably going to talk to him a little bit about cuties. I'm interested in a bit more and digging into his thoughts on that. And overall, him and I are just going to have a little bond sesh. Am I applying for affiliate? Today is my 7th day of streaming. Yay! So officially after today, I can be affiliate. Yes, that's true. I've only been streaming for 7 days. It's been a wild ride so far, and I'm super appreciative. I will be getting a regular streaming schedule up at some point, but today is not that day. I think we should raid someone, though. So who would you guys like to raid? We got lots of options. Preferably, I'd like to raid somebody that I like at least, but we don't have to. We could raid somebody I don't really dislike anyone. The only one I see live right now is Prime K's that I am following. Is there anyone? Do you guys want to raid it? Bye, nice person. Bye. This stream is killing me. Hopefully in a good way. Hopefully like killing you with laughter, not because it's favorite viewer who danced. She hasn't answered favorite viewer yet. I'm sorry. It is lagging. I apologize. I'm not really sure why. Some days it's just bad and some days it's good. I'm even on my 5G, probably just because of my Wi-Fi. Let's raid Prime K's. I think we're going to do that. If you haven't already followed, I'm going to be bouncing, so make sure you follow me quickly. And I am going to send you guys over to Prime K's. Make sure when you hop in his chat that you scream Trash Goblins. And I'll make sure I spell his name right. All right, ready, steady, go! Let's go, guys. Let's raid him.